Alrighty, everybody, welcome to the Eerie Hours. I am your host, Gene Skinner, and I realized I forgot to change a few things. So give me 1 second here. I have all the music background stuff, and I forgot to change that, so give me 1 second. Let's get rid of that. Get rid of that. That. You have to change things slightly, and where is... Yes, there we go. Okay, 1 second as I put the normal stuff up. Let's go with... Where is that first? Then that, and then that. There we go. Now everything's back to normal. Alright, hope we're having a good Friday so far tonight. I'm going to open my beer here that I have to drink tonight. This is by the Shiner Brewing Company. This is Tex Hex. It is their Brujas Brew IPA. It is an Indian Pale Ale brewed with cactus water. So, you know, Bruja is another term for witch. It's a Mexican term for witch. And since we're talking about skinwalkers, it's an appropriate beer to have. It's actually not that costly either, and I don't think the the ABV is very high on it. Let me check as soon as I'm done pouring it. No, it is... Where is it? Where is the... I knew it was like... Here somewhere, 1 second. 7%, so that's not super high, that's normal. It is a mythical IPA brewed with cactus water and featuring Amarillo hops. So that's going to give it a very... more wild ale kind of taste, though again it's an IPA. So I'm gonna let that sit. The head's actually kind of high on that, so I want the carbonation to die down just a little bit. Hope we're all having a good night, like I said. So let's get to our first video that talks about the lore. Here we go. This is from Mythology and Fiction Explained. In case you're wondering what the can itself looks like for the beer, too. You can see that in Gene's Tiki and Cocktail Corner. It's actually pretty nice looking. And let me give a link to where
There
I
are
bought it
many
from.
truly terrifying legends that originate from Native American folklore. One that stands out for many is the Wendigo, maybe because deep down it reflects our very own human nature. But there are legends out there that we know next to nothing about because they are deemed so horrid, so evil, that even talking about them or mentioning them in passing is a bad omen. Today's video will be on the Nadlushi, the Navajo skinwalker. Now, skinwalkers are a topic I've wanted to cover for a while, but the taboo around the subject does mean there isn't a wealth of information out there. So I guess we start with the obvious. What exactly is a skinwalker?
What is a skinwalker?
At first glance, skinwalkers are essentially shapeshifters, but shapeshifter in itself is a very loose term. You can transform into an animal, an object, or another human. It literally just means you can alter your shape or form. The transformation of skinwalkers for the most part is limited to just animals.
And again, this
The
beer's
biggest hint we get is from its native name, Nadlushi. In the Navajo language, this roughly translates to mean he or she who goes on all fours, but that doesn't necessarily limit the transformation to four-legged animals. The Navajo saw skinwalkers as powerful witches or corrupt medicine men who had obtained the highest level of priesthood, but instead they choose to use these supernatural abilities to inflict harm and suffering on others. The fear of repercussion coupled with a distrust of outsiders are two fairly compelling reasons why skinwalkers aren't openly talked about. There is also the belief that skinwalkers only share their practices with their own kind, which only adds to the mystery surrounding them. This also means it's unlikely that the Navajo know who among them is actually a skinwalker, as they transform under the cover of night. What type of animal they transform into does seem to vary, the most common being a coyote, which is often seen as a trickster. They can also take the form of other animals such as foxes, wolves, owls, eagles, and crows.
You know, normal things.
The form they take depends on what they require, as each animal has a different set of unique abilities. If they planned on attacking someone, then a wolf would be a good choice, whereas transforming into some kind of bird offers the ability of flight. And even something like a crow being an omen of death could act as a warning or a threat.
I mean, you could also have a
vulture, the skinwalker wears the skin of the animal they transform into, hence the name. But wearing the skin of most animals was seen as taboo by many tribes, and the Navajo only wore sheepskin and buckskin when it came to ceremonial purposes. So unless the skinwalkers only wore these skins during the night, it kind of defeats the whole you never know who the skinwalker among you is, because it's obviously the person wearing the animal skin.
Yeah.
What it actually takes to become a skinwalker, no one really knows for sure. But as witches and medicine men, it's believed that a ritual must be performed, and given their nature, it's likely to have been the dark and nefarious kind. There is also the belief that to become a skinwalker, you must first take the life of someone close to you, a friend or family member. So if some do in fact deem it worthy of
Reddit
taking the life
moderators
of
are
another,
skinwalkers.
then surely what you receive in return must be impressive. Well, along with being able to turn into animals, skinwalkers can mimic the sound or voice of any animal or human. With the transformation comes enhanced stamina, strength, and speed. Catching a skinwalker in animal form is thought to be nigh on impossible.
Again, this is more
Some skinwalkers were even capable of reading the human mind, and if one was to stare into the eyes of a skinwalker for long enough, they can enter your mind and take control of your body. There isn't much said about how one kills a skinwalker, but similar to stories of werewolves, some believe that saying a skinwalker's full name out loud will result in them having to atone for their crimes and even dying in some cases. It's difficult to say for sure what a skinwalker's motives are. They may be seen as evil, but they are still human, and like some humans, they are driven by their own selfish and malicious nature. As you may expect, over the years there have been hundreds of stories of people claiming to have seen or encountered skinwalkers, but none of these have been proven. If a video detailing some of these accounts and stories is something you'd like to see, then let me know in the comments below. If you have enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to leave a thumbs up, as it really does go a long way. As
Kill
always,
someone close to you, hey, come
I've been
here.
your host, Mythology and Fiction Explained.
So yeah, with this very brief summary of what skinwalkers are. Now let's watch one of these videos. This is from Snarled.
Who or what would have done such a thing? Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear
Remember
something
this
scary?
channel, right? Volume 2, Unexplained Events. The Skinwalkers.
There are some creatures so powerful and malicious that even
so
speaking
generic.
about them will make you their target. That's why so little is known about the Skinwalkers, the legendary creatures of the Navajo Nation. Yee-Nal-Dushi, another name for the Skinwalkers,
Hey girl, you look
translates
like this all
to
the time,
he
or are
who
you a
walks on all
skinwalker?
fours. They are said to be witches who have gained the power to shapeshift. They will wear the skin of the animal they wish to take the form of, and once the transformation
true,
is
Nathan, you
complete,
do live in the
they will
backyard
have
of
the
skinwalkers.
strengths and
Navajo are
powers
all around.
of that animal.
Arizona.
But this isn't done just for the fun of it. The intent of the skinwalkers is pure evil. They can use mind control on their victims to make them hurt others and themselves. One of their initiation rituals is to murder a family member. It is also said that if you make eye contact with a skinwalker, it will absorb your soul and steal your body. This may seem like another urban legend, but to the Navajo, it is very real. In 1878, about 40 people were purged by tribe members who accused them of practicing malevolent witchcraft. And then, there is the curious case of Sarah Saganitso. In June of 1987, Sarah was working the night shift at the Flagstaff Medical Center in Arizona.
Look at that.
It was her first time working the late shift, and her family became worried when she didn't come home. They went to the medical center the following morning, and that's when they found the body of a woman whose face was so bruised she was almost unrecognizable. But they knew that it was Sarah. Her torso had numerous stab wounds, and her left breast appeared to have been bitten off. There was also a broken stick, oddly left on her neck, as well as a clump of grass from a graveyard in the distance found near her car. Who, or what, would have done such a thing? The police believed it was George Abney, a former professor at Northern Arizona University. He had apparently been telling his friends about...
Well, heads up, we've detected copyrighted audio, so we can't play any more of this. It's either the music or the actual channel has that kind of bot on it, so I hope we've enjoyed that story. If you have, one second, I'll get the fucking link thing. I mean, I don't care either way, Snarled, if you think I'm stealing your content. I'm commenting on it. I know that's hard to believe. It's a, commentary is actually supposed to be allowed in most cases, and that's considered fair use, but, YouTube be that way, though. So if anyone wants to know about that, it's in the Spook House. The other one will probably get the same thing, too. There's one more video by them in this. But, that happens. We'll wait till it goes away. According to the Navajo, just watching these videos and conversing about skinwalkers makes me a target. Yeah, that's true. Just mentioning them or talking about them makes you a target at all. I mean, probably the same with Bruja. And I've said that name like a few times now. But I don't live in the desert, nor do I live near any Navajo. If anything, I'd probably get a Wendigo, and then I get a Skinwalker. Because Wendigo is definitely part of where I live. But that's different. They're not the exact same thing either. Because they were seen as a, spirit of hunger and winter. So, that'd be that, though. Let's, wait still. Because we have to wait. I need this fucking shit to go away. Come on already, YouTube. It's done. I'm done having the video play. It's audio. It's me talking. Fuck off. This beer's good, like I said. I don't really taste the cactus water. I don't think you'd taste it really that much. Definitely taste the hops. I do like Amarillo hops. They're very, like Azaka hops. They're very kind of, I wouldn't say like fruity in any way, like some hops can be kind of tropical. I'd say more like, best way to put it is like earthy, but not in a bad way. Okay, we're good. No, cactus water doesn't taste like any. No, it doesn't. It's just regular water. I mean, from a cactus. Susie Buzzkill, yes indeed. Let's go on with Skinwalker, Lore Explained by The Last Bacon. I'd say beacon, but it's not spelled the way it should be, so it's bacon.
The year is 1994, Utah. Terry and Gwen Sherman purchase a ranch in the countryside. At first, things seem relatively normal,
the Skinwalker Ranch?
but the longer they stay, the more odd things they notice. At first, the disturbances are small. Strange sounds in the middle of the night. Odd trees that look like their branches had been cut off. A strange persisting chemical smell around a batch of bushes. On their own, seemingly just harmless coincidences, but they would soon culminate into something much bigger. At night, the family begins seeing glowing lights in the sky, and later, even just straight up identifies UFOs hovering over their cattle. They wake up at midnight to hear voices speak in languages they don't understand.
That's always a good sign.
7 of their cows die or go missing with odd details present, such as missing very specific body parts. It's safe to say the family is terrified, and yet their most harrowing encounter is still to come. One evening, about 18 months after they had moved in, Terry is walking their dogs around the property when he comes across a wolf. But this isn't a regular wolf.
It acts weird.
It is huge, deformed with orange blazing eyes. Terry fires at him, and even though the bullets seemingly have no physical effect, they at least scare the creature off. Unsurprisingly, the Sherman family sold the ranch soon after. Following this incident, the place was purchased by paranormal investigators with the goal of understanding what the family was experiencing. Over the next few years, they have amassed over 100 incidents, including sightings of humanoid figures in trees, reports of weird skin
diseases, from a movie,
and unexplained headaches.
Like Zero, that's that movie.
This was the history of the Skinwalker
pretending that's a real
Ranch,
image.
a place named after the Native American legend.
Chills after watching
also
too much
to
at
be the
Expo.
topic of today's video. I'll tell you everything we know about these entities, including appearance, creation, and powers, so you know what to look out for next time you're taking a hike in the woods. So without any further
It's a good movie.
ado,
Yeah, X-Zero is fun.
cuddle up to
We
your
watched
pets,
it. Don't watch
prepare
the
your
sequel
magic
because it
wands,
sucks.
and let's go. Now, to get us started, just as with the Wendigo lore, I have to mention that due to the nature of this legend,
I think there's actually like
different
2 more
interpretations
sequels
and
to it. I don't
retellings
remember.
give us skinwalkers with varied appearances, processes through which they are created, as well as abilities. So for many of these, I will simply be mentioning all of the most common interpretations. On the surface level, they come from centuries-old Navajo legends, where they are depicted as shape-shifting entities, or sometimes a harmful witch. The original word for skinwalker, which I won't even try to pronounce, has been translated as meaning, by means of it, it goes on all fours, and it is often perceived as a bad omen to even mention it out loud,
Yep.
which is why the natives don't like discussing the topic with outsiders. This has of course led to most of the legend being shrouded in mystery, but there are at least a few things which we have come to learn. Originally, skinwalkers were thought to be medicine men who would use their concoctions for evil or malevolent rituals and practices. However, technically, any man, woman, or child could become one if they simply commit something significantly evil. As the skinwalkers, they would become deformed and feral, all leading to them developing their signature ability to turn into or possess either a wild animal.
Why does it look like a coyote? Not a
sometimes
coyote,
even a
but
person.
why does it look like a hyena?
This
though?
creature would then be much larger than its natural counterpart, often possessing huge fangs and claws, together with unmistakably orange/red blazing eyes. These entities would live out in the wilderness, in deep forests or caverns, waiting for potential prey.
Potential prey.
It is unknown how much intelligence they keep after transforming, or whether they simply become completely wild like the animals they're embodying. But what is known is that killing them is almost impossible, unless one happens to have a bullet or a knife dipped in white ash.
A bullet or
Now
knife dipped in
sadly,
white ash?
this is where the story pretty much trails off. Because the natives are so reluctant to talk about the topic, we don't know many specifics, tales of encounters, or other characteristics of the skinwalkers.
Good job.
To be completely fair, as time and technology have progressed, less and less people seem to believe in the legend, and currently, even the children who would most often be passing these stories along seem to just substitute other, more commonly referenced monsters into their tales. But hey, I suppose at the end of the day, if you're ever planning to take a hike in the American Southwest, and you happen to have some white ash in your cupboard,
Yeah, kill your most beloved
well,
person is
maybe
a big
just
thing,
take it
like
with
someone really
you.
close to you.
because you never know what you might run
That's
into.
considered the dark
But
thing you
that
do.
brings us to the end of the video, so I hope you guys enjoyed and have learned something new about the terrifying entities that maybe inhabit the world around us.
Well, they
If you
inhabit
guys have
the
other
desert of any
entities that
place.
you would like me to cover,
I mean, they're
please make sure
Navajo,
to
but
mention
there's a
them down in the
specific
comments
area of
below.
the world they
This,
inhabit.
for example, was also a suggested video by you guys, so trust me, I am reading those comments. If you liked the video, maybe consider leaving a like or subscribing. Both of those would be very much appreciated. And with that, I'm gonna see you all in whatever next video I make.
Well, thanks,
Bye
lad.
bye.
Thanks, the last bacon. We're moving on now. Here's a Skinwalker creepypasta from mythology and fiction. Just take a listen
My
to this.
father once told me a story that I've never been able to forget, for a few reasons. I think it's the first story he ever told me as a child.
The names
It's
are the
also story of how
Wachowski
my grandfather
sisters.
died. But honestly, that isn't the reason. You hear stories on TV, or sometimes you overhear something in a public place. People talk about ghosts and aliens, and you think to yourself, that ain't real. They're making it up, or they're mistaken. Perhaps they're even crazy, or something like
It's
that.
not just the
You just
Navajo,
can't
they're
believe
just the
anything they're
most known
saying.
for them, given as they
That
give
is
them
until
name.
something happens.
I know, I'm just saying
Something
though,
that
it's
brings
the
it all
specific
together,
region of the
connects
north,
the dots in a way that you didn't
southwest
think of before.
is the biggest thing with
Maybe it
skinwalkers. I
happens
mean,
to
they
you,
go to all the
or
way to
maybe you
Great
hear the same
Plains,
story
but
again and again.
I don't know any
happening
other
to different
place that
people.
they really go.
It doesn't take long before the world becomes a lot bigger than you thought it was. As I said, this is a story my father
Well,
told
Dakota
me,
has
but I
skinwalkers,
never
but I know
believed
them.
him,
Yeah, of course they
even
do.
though he swore up and down
I mean,
that
like
it
I
was
said,
true.
those kind of tribes
It
make
wasn't until I
sense.
started clicking around the internet that I started to believe.
I just don't
I
think
started to hear
like
stories just like the one my
the
father
East
told
Coast
me.
has them really.
It didn't take long before I began
I
to
mean,
believe
I imagine
in the
again
rake.
Southwest,
That's not what my
West
father
Coast,
called it, of
and
course.
probably a bit of
He's
high
never
plains.
used the internet in his life. He
The
wouldn't know
mountainous region
that
like
that's what the
that.
consensus named it. When he chose to call it anything other than it, or that thing, he called it Skinwalker, after an old Cherokee tale his grandfather told him.
Cherokee
But
have
I'll
it
tell
too,
you
okay.
the story, the way he told it to me. We were out hunting one night, he told me. Coyotes, we'd kill them for $50 a skin. At that point, they lived on a dairy farm in Ohio. They'd also kill
Oh,
calves sometimes.
Ohio!
We'd do it every night.
I
because
gotta
we
listen
needed
to
the
that
money.
again.
Some
Ohio,
father told
of
him.
course.
But I'll tell
The
you
Midwest
story,
too, I guess,
way he
has
told
them
it to
as
me.
well.
We were out hunting
So
one
maybe
night, he
maybe
told me.
skinwalkers could
Coyotes,
be even
we'd
close
kill
on
them
the East
for
Coast.
$50 a skin. At that point, they lived on a dairy farm in Ohio.
In
They'd also
Ohio.
kill calves sometimes. We'd do it every night because we needed the money. sometimes while we were out, we'd come across a deer and kill that too. Our landlord didn't mind, and it could feed our family for a few nights and save us some money. Anyway, we were done making the rounds and began to head
Wendigo
home,
may also be some
walking,
form of one
because
of
we
the
didn't have a
influences.
car
Yeah, I
back
mean,
then
that's
or
true
some
too.
four-wheeler. We cut through the woods, and that's when we came upon it.
It's a
Blood
whole thing of how
everywhere,
a culture
splattered on the trees,
changes
in
their
the grass,
monsters
in the
and
creek,
everything like that in legends.
everywhere.
Cultural
At
diffusion
first we
definitely
figured
happens
it was
with
a
all the
pack of
natives, even though they
coyotes.
fucking killed each
We'd
other
seen
all the
it
time too.
sometimes.
That's
They
no
can't
exaggeration.
scavenge, and they start hunting deer or cattle. The worst was when they were bred
Again,
with
I
feral
say
dogs.
that being part native.
But it wasn't like that.
They
See,
did fucking kill
when
each
a pack
other all
of
the
dogs
time.
or wolves or even coyotes attack something, they do it right.
I mean,
They'll
we've
pick
done
one of
that as
its
human
weak
beings in
or
other
sick
places of the world too.
or
so.
old or just small. They'll hunt it. They'll draw it into a corner, someplace it can't get out of. And then they'll run it to the biggest one, the alpha. That deer will never see the alpha coming. It might hear it, but it will never see it. It'll just notice that its throat's gone and then drop dead. It's quick, it's clean, but that wasn't what happened here. Something had run up on a den of deer. Coyotes won't attack a den, neither will wolves, because there's too much of a fight. There was 3, I think. 3 bodies just torn apart. You'd see a head here, a leg here, a torso there. Predators don't do that. They don't leave behind scraps. Whatever had done this hadn't done it for food, but for fun. Of course, at the time, we were unaware.
Part
We
native,
saw a
part
bunch of
Irish, and part
carcasses,
German.
and we
Who
thought it
and
was
someone in
something we
my
could
net
take care
passed in,
of.
I killed. Yeah.
I remember my
True.
dad telling me to go home. He thought it was a pack of feral dogs. But I wasn't leaving him, and I damn sure wasn't walking through 2 miles of
I mean,
woods
that's
alone,
just humanity in
with nothing
general.
but a 22 and a
Do
pocket
you
knife.
have something different
He
from
was only
somebody else?
13 at
Well,
the
time
time,
to fucking
So
die.
a 22 rifle
I'm not
was
saying
about
that's
the
like
only
a
gun
bad
he
thing.
could
That's just how
reliably
we are. We
use.
got that from fucking
Dad had a shotgun,
chimpanzees.
and I wasn't going
They
anywhere
do that
without
shit
him.
too and fucking cannibalize each
It
other.
took me a while to convince him.
At least for the
but
most
finally
part,
we
we
began
don't
tracking
do
whatever
that.
had left the
For
carcasses
the
behind.
most part,
And it wasn't hard either. We just followed the
it still
blood.
happens.
Either
But
that thing had
not
bred a
as
deer
like,
before it got
frequently as
away,
it does with those
or
fucking
it dragged on
monkeys.
for a mile. I don't know. But what I do know is that I had never seen my father scared before that night. We started hearing noises. I've been in a lot of woods in my life. I've been all over the world. But I've never heard noises similar to the ones I did that night. I heard things screaming. I heard deer and foxes, rabbits, raccoons and birds, all of them just scared. Keep in mind this must have been around 12 or 1 o'clock. Except for foxes and some birds, nothing was supposed to even be awake. But they weren't just awake, they were moving. I saw flocks of birds that night fly straight into trees just trying to get out of there. We eventually came across a pack of coyotes. Nearly shot a couple of them, thinking it's what we were looking for. But then we saw they were running towards us. They ran right past us, didn't even notice us. Then some deer did the same. Some rabbits, squirrels, foxes,
Yeah, the
and
animals
even
are
a couple of
scared.
wild
Whatever's
hogs.
there is scaring the fuck out of
These
them.
things were supposed to be eating each other, and the only thing they cared about was getting the hell out of there. We should have put it together quicker, that maybe whatever we were tracking, it wasn't something we were supposed to see, and it wasn't something we could kill. I don't know why we didn't just go home. I guess we were curious. I think that was my dad's nature, to go towards trouble, to fight. And knowing what I knew about what my father did during the war, my nature was to stay close to him. We finally got into an open valley. It was normally a soy field, but it wasn't in season, so it was nothing
They were
more
running
than just
the other
flat
way.
dirt. We saw the tracks. A lot of animals fleeing the forest had paved over the land, but where the deer blood was, nothing had taken a single step, like they were leaving it for us to find. The tracks were shallow. Whatever it was couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, but that didn't mean much. A bobcat weighing around 40 pounds once nearly tore out my throat.
Yeah.
All that means is that it's quick and most definitely hard to hit. So we continued to follow the tracks, and it didn't take us long to find where it was. There's this old school that sits on top of a hill. Half of it had been ripped out by a tornado, but nobody lived there. Not for a long time. We caught homeless people in there sometimes, or druggies looking for a safe place to shoot up.
Yeah.
We figured that maybe that
Why
was
would you
it.
think that's a safe
Maybe it
place
was
to
some
shoot
kind
up?
of sick kid riding a high. But we didn't think that for long. We get within 50 yards, and we hear this noise. A screeching kind of sound. It was sort of made up of 2 different sounds.
Oh no.
One was a high-pitched screech, and the other was a low-pitched growl. It was making them both at the same time. We get within 20 yards, and we hear the same sound. I can remember thinking that it sounded like paper being torn apart, with someone swinging water in a bucket back and forth. Dad looks at me, and kneels down. He whispers, I have to stay behind him because we're about to corner him. Any animal will fight when it's cornered, especially if it's a predator, but we can tell by the tracks that it's just one. He tells me it's probably a single feral dog, most likely rabid. The plan is to sneak up on it when it's eating, shoot it, and then keep shooting it until it don't move no more, then slit its throat. And if it gets to Dad, then it's my job to shoot or stab it to get it off him. He begins to walk up, and I'm right behind him, a tad to his side. I can see what it is. It was leaning over a carcass, tearing off its flesh, and throwing whatever it didn't nibble aside. There was blood all over the brick, glistening in the moonlight. It was pale white, human looking, but not quite human. It had arms and legs like a human, but it sat like a monkey, hunched over, and its hands weren't normal. It had long fingers with claws at the end.
Oh boy.
After seeing it, my dad began to hesitate. He wasn't about to fire on a person, so he cleared his throat and tried to get it to turn around.
Yeah, and it has no eyes. Oh god, look at those things.
I ain't never heard true silence before, and I never did after that. But for 2 seconds, nothing. Nothing made any noise, which made it even louder when it turned around. It made this shrill cry and jumped on my dad. He fired a shot, but I think he missed. If he hit the thing, then it certainly didn't care. But it was on him, tearing parts of him off.
Woo!
I started shooting with the 22, point blank, but it barely even bled the thing. I got off 5 rounds, and then I started hitting it with the gun butt, but it wasn't budging. It didn't even register that I was there, and then it began clawing at my dad, taking off bits of his flesh. It started on his torso, ripping off the skin. I could barely recognize him. It tore off his throat. It tore off his nose, his eyes. It scalped him.
Oh my god.
Then it really started digging in. It ripped off the bottom half of his jaw.
Well, he
the little
dead
bones
then.
in the tube of your neck.
Clearly.
And then his ribs. But somehow my dad's knife ended up in the thing's shoulder, and my dad was now on its back. I began to run, and by God I'm running faster than I've ever run before. It was following me. I ended up back in the woods, opposite to the ones we had been in, and I'm heading towards my landlord's house. It was only about half a mile away.
Yeah.
I can hear this thing screeching and moaning. I hear tree branches crack and get thrown around.
Those
it's like someone's taking an axe to every tree I pass.
You know,
it's
supposed
cracking
to be in the
so loud and often,
eastern
but
part
I just
of the
ain't
United
looking
States.
back. Finally I tripped into some gravel. I look up and there's my landlord and a bunch of his buddies drinking around a campfire. I scream and I cry, and they come over. I'm telling them to call an ambulance, and he looks at me, and I'll never forget what he said. "What is that on your back?" he asked me. Just as he said it, he saw one of those god-awful flannel shirts my dad wore everywhere. It was the only thing that was left of my dad.
Oh no.
Most of his head, torso, and waist was all gone.
Oh god.
Suddenly we hear it, screeching.
Thank you guys.
My landlord grabs me, and my dad gets thrown to the ground. I'm fighting him, crying, because I still think we can save him somehow.
Wow, his
But
head's
my dad
off!
was gone. He picked me up and brought him inside with him. He and his buddies were all inside, locking the doors and getting their guns. The landlord asked me what happened, but I just don't know what to tell him. He pieced enough of it together to understand that there was something dangerous out there. All the lights in the house are on. Someone called the
I
cops.
understand shock,
They'll
but that's
be
just
here,
like, I think we could
but in
save my dad.
15
No.
minutes.
No, bro, he
We
gone,
look
he
outside,
dead.
and we see it walk in front of the fire they made. I still can't tell what it is, but one of them says it looks like an ape.
An ape?
Suddenly something goes through the window, and we fire. But when we take a second look, we see it's my landlord's dog. Just the body though, not its head or its legs. We start pushing things in front of the doors and the windows, when we hear something in the garage. I remember one of my friends saying the door was open. We hear metal and glass just being ripped apart. We put a couch and a TV in front of the door to the garage, hoping it would hold.
Garage.
It banged around some more, but then it got quiet.
Now I'm taking out
Not
the story
silent like it
because
was
of
before.
Brit Bong English.
We could still hear things move around. The guys were talking, making sure that their guns were ready, and someone handed me a pistol. No sooner than I cocked back the hammer, we hear something shatter upstairs. Then we heard it screech again.
Also, obviously,
Except this time
isn't
it was
really
louder.
a real
It didn't
story. It's a
echo or fade,
creepypasta.
because it was inside.
That's by Max
We all
Milton.
rushed to the one door leading upstairs,
Minton.
and we got to it just as that thing did. It opened it just a bit, and 4 or 5 men slammed into it. It got its hand caught in the door. Someone with a shotgun took care of that, put the barrel right up against its wrist and pulled the trigger, cut its hand straight off. That only pissed it off though. It started pushing on the door, clawing. We were on one side, pushing back as best we could, and it was on the other doing the same. The wood just wasn't going to hold, so someone tells us to keep our heads down. Suddenly the top half of the door is just gone. My ears are ringing, and there are splinters everywhere. 2 or 3 of them just unloaded on the top half of the door. I don't really know where it went after that. The police got here, but I was still glued to the door. The sun was up before they managed to get me away from it. They put me in the hospital.
Did you see the video about a guy going to a skinwalker cave? I've seen, when I was looking, I saw like one dude possibly talk about going to a skinwalker cave.
We didn't talk much. Not about that thing anyway.
Now it's red circles.
But I signed up for the army when I was 19, and he sat me down with a drink of scotch as a send-off. I asked him right away what the police told him. The story they went with was a wild animal, probably a wolf or maybe a bear that had migrated north. I asked him how they could say that when they had the hand. He looked at me, stunned. He tells me that the hand never made it back to the station. The cop that was carrying the hand had a car wreck, driving into a tree and dying on impact. The hand was never found.
Is it Spook House? Okay.
Probably taken away by another animal. When the cops finally acknowledged that the hand even existed, they said it was simply the paw of a bear that looked like a human hand. I never talked to the landlord again. He went missing when I was in basic training.
Skinwalker Cave, I see it. The Paranormal Files.
They said he owed people some money and just ran away.
Thank you.
But I don't think it was that
might
simple.
Play that for us tonight.
I never went back to those woods. I wouldn't even if I had the whole US Army at my back. But that was a lie. When my mother died, I don't think my father felt he had anything left, and he might as well go back and settle old scores. He went to those woods, but he never came back.
I sneezed again, but I muted that time.
And they did a show for everyone involved, but I knew that they weren't really looking. I had to get one drunk and slip him a few 50s before he finally told me.
Do you think skinwalkers
they get a few
aliens?
calls every year about those woods, about someone just upping and vanishing. But that was all he wanted to tell me. Before he got up and left with the rest of his team, he wrote something on a napkin. The rake.
The rake.
Until I searched it on the internet.
Oh boy, so that's what that was.
Honestly, I would have rather not known.
Okay. Nice. That's a good way to end that story. I'm gonna take this, and this is moving. This is going somewhere else for a minute. Now we're gonna watch this.
Hello, my dark darlings. I hope you're enjoying your latest voyage into the dark. But if you're caught up and thinking, now what? It would be a great time to do what I love to do. And that's to unwind by rocking a few challenging puzzle levels with Best Fiends. Best Fiends is the infamously impossible to put down puzzle game with over 100 million downloads and counting. A free to download mobile game with over 5,000 challenges, with more added all the time. Once you download Best Fiends, boredom won't stand a chance. Download Best Fiends free today on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends.
Alright, well there's that ad gone.
Hey, I'm Markia. Want to hear something scary?
Oh, go on. I'm sure this is gonna get, again, like, heads up who type of copyright out.
Road Killer. Appearances can be deceiving. They say good things come in small packages, but they never tell you that bad things can come in good packages too. What appears to be sweet and innocent is sometimes much, much worse. Like in this story, inspired by our listener, Michael Page. Every Christmas, Ani and Catherine would drive up to meet their family at the cabin they shared in the Alaskan woods. Ani loved staying there, but she hated the drive because of her sister. Catherine was the oldest and very bossy, especially on trips. The weather was on the verge of a snowstorm and visibility wasn't great, but Ani was trying to make good time and hoping she could beat the storm. Catherine was doing her best backseat driving, telling her sister to slow down or to even pull over so she could drive. Soon, they were arguing, just like they did on this trip every year. As things got heated, Ani took her eyes off the road to yell at Catherine, who suddenly gasped, "Look out!" Up ahead, standing in the center of the road, staring straight into their headlights, was a white reindeer. Had the light not been reflecting in its eyes, Ani wouldn't have seen it at all. There was barely enough time for her to slam on the brakes and swerve. The sisters screamed as the car spun out of control and smashed hard into a bank of snow along the edge of the road. They looked back and saw that they narrowly missed the majestic reindeer that now turned and looked at them.
Yeah,
it jerked erratically as it moved, and its eyes still glowed a bright orange, even in the dark. Everything seemed to quiet as the snow gently fell around them. Neither sister dared take a breath, and then suddenly, the creature snorted and stomped his hooves on the road as it let out a guttural roar, and then lowered his antlers and charged straight for the car.
Oh no.
Ani moved towards Catherine as the reindeer crashed into the driver's side, which pushed the car deeper into the snow. The sisters held on tightly to each other as the deer backed up and charged again. There was a loud crack as its massive antlers smashed into the side, causing a spiderweb of cracks along the window.
Yeah, that crack
they
is literally taken
braced
off
for
of,
another impact, but it never came. Ani and Catherine looked for the reindeer, but it was still snowing hard. It could have been a few feet or a few miles away, and they would not have been able to tell. Catherine calmed down enough to take charge and told Ani to get them out of there. The old resentment started to creep in, but Ani realized that her sister was right and started the car. She shifted it into drive, but the car wouldn't move. The animal had pushed them too deep into the snow. They both reached for their phones at the same time and tried to call their dad. Ani gave her sister a sarcastic smirk when she got through first. He knew where they were located and said they would be there within the hour. No other vehicles passed as they sat there, waiting. After a long, awkward silence, Ani decided she'd try to make peace with her sister. But when she turned to her, there was terror on Catherine's face. She was trying to speak, but nothing was coming out. She pointed behind Ani, who slowly turned and looked through the cracked windows. The reindeer had returned. Only this time, something was very wrong with it.
Standing upright.
The beast now stood on its hind legs and walked erratically towards them. They watched as the reindeer's face shifted and looked more like a crazed man. The hooves on his front legs gave way to clawed hands as it lurched closer. It dug into their door frame and began to pull on it. They both huddled together in terrified silence as metal began to creak. It was going to rip that door off, and there was nothing they could do. Ani tried opening her sister's door, but it was stuck against the snow. They were trapped, and her escape attempt seemed to make the creature angrier. Its long white neck flexed as it let loose noises that sounded like female voices.
Oh no.
The voices sounded both entreating and mocking as they came forth from this transformed, unearthly creature. Catherine cringed, hugging her sister tight, pulling her to the window furthest from the beast. Climb out the window and run as soon as it rips off the door, Ani. I'll keep it busy long enough for you to get away, Catherine urged. But Ani wasn't going to let Catherine boss her around this time. No, we'll fight it together, Catherine. We're in this together. Ani raised her fist, shouting through the window at the skinwalker. We're not afraid of you.
Looks like an alpaca.
Suddenly, light filled the car as they could see another vehicle quickly approaching.
Oh, it's their dad.
The creature looked as well and snarled. It glanced one more time at the both of them, pinning them with its glowing eyes, and then ran for the woods, transforming back into a reindeer as it disappeared into the night. The girls were relieved as the truck stopped and their parents got out wielding snow shovels. As the sisters pulled back onto the road, they were followed closely behind by their parents. Their dad noted in a text that their back license plate was missing. The one thing that could identify them in their car if someone had the means to find it. The sisters shivered, aware that they could never be certain that it wouldn't one day find them and try to finish what it had started.
How come this one didn't get any notifications of head right?
Hello, my dark darlings. I hope you're enjoying your latest voyage into the dark. Some other episodes I could recommend for you are the ones involving the legendary Japanese snow witch.
Anyway, let's move on to the next thing. The most believable alien encounter, the Skinwalker Ranch story by Mr. Ballin. Here we go.
Most paranormal location on the planet. Others call this whole thing just a big hoax. But what is undeniably true, and frankly what makes this case so much more interesting, is that unlike the vast majority of paranormal stories and claims, this case was put to an enormous amount of scientific scrutiny. In fact, there was a decade-long study done on this case where PhDs and scientists converged on this one location.
Yeah, Mr. Ball and the Seal, that's right.
Studied, all these claims of the paranormal that was happening in the area. And after a decade of research, the findings are pretty mind-blowing. And the case that I'm referring to is none other than the very famous Skinwalker Ranch. So the too long didn't read version of this story is you have a family that purchases a ranch out in Utah, and as soon as they move in, they start noticing some pretty bizarre things around their property. Everything from, some of their livestock going missing or being harmed. They have strange sightings in the woods of creatures and lights in the sky. They eventually report it to the news, and that news story gets picked up by a couple of other outlets, and a billionaire who is obsessed with researching the paranormal sees this story. He buys the property and installs an entire team of scientists and researchers to basically try to figure out what was happening at this ranch. Mm-hmm. And they spend 10 years studying this ranch. The outcome is, turns out some strange things really were happening there. Before we get started, if this type of content appeals to you, the kind of strange, dark, mysterious content delivered in a story format, well, if that appeals to you, that's what my channel's all about. And I post 3 to 4 times a week. So if that appeals to you, please gently ransack the like button.
Ransack the like button.
All notifications so you can get all of my content every time I upload every week. All right, on with the story. In the northeastern corner of Utah lies a 500-acre plot of land, it's all desert, where a ranch sits, and that is Skinwalker Ranch. It was built in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it was actually built on a piece of land that had apparently been cursed. Prior to its construction, the Navajo tribe had a feud with the Utes Native American tribe. The Utes were selling off other Native Americans that they would capture. They would sell them into slavery to the United States. And so the Navajo, who had previously lived in the area where this ranch actually was built, they were forced off their land as the Utes came in and were rounding them up and selling them into slavery. And before the Navajo left that area, they cursed the land with what's called the Skinwalker curse. The idea was they were going to torment the Utes tribe for the hardships they had inflicted on the Navajo. The Skinwalker curse, legend has it, is this curse where these witches descend on the area and take the form or wear the skin of various predatory animals in the area, namely large wolves and foxes. They inhabit those bodies and terrorize anybody in the cursed land. At some point, this ranch is actually built on the land that had apparently been cursed. It wasn't until many years later when owners of that ranch started seeing predatory animals doing some very strange things in and around their property, that they did some research on the area, learned about this curse, and then before long, the nickname had stuck. In 1994, Terry and Gwen Sherman purchased Skinwalker Ranch. It had actually been abandoned by the previous owners for the last few years, so when they purchased it, they got it for way below market price. So they are just so excited to be moving in. They breed cattle, and so they had 500 acres to let their cattle free roam. It was like the dream purchase for this family. And so when they finally do move in, like the day they move in, they don't really care that the grass is overgrown. It looks like things are kind of in disrepair. And in fact, when they go into the homestead, like the actual house on the property, they were so excited about everything that they kind of overlooked some of the strange things that they immediately noticed about the property. They go inside and every window has a deadbolt on it. The inside and outside of every door in the house, not just the doors leading outside, doors leading between rooms had locks, the front and back side.
Yes, the feds did own the Skinwalker Ranch for a time.
Pipes that were driven into the ground at the front door and back door of the property with massive chains stringing off of them, which looked like pretty powerful guard dogs had been there. They're thinking to themselves, well, this is a huge piece of property. Perhaps the previous owners are a little bit paranoid because they're kind of isolated. And so they didn't really raise a red flag when, to be honest, had I moved into a property where every single door and window had multiple locks on it, they had these big guard dogs, I'd probably ask a couple questions. But you know what? Terry and Gwen, they're just so excited about this purchase that, again, they kind of just overlook it. So on the day that they are moving in, Terry and Gwen have some family members over to help them offload trucks and move stuff into the homestead. And it's during this process, as they're moving things out of the truck into the house. And again, you got to remember that the house is situated like right in the middle of the property. And you can see in every direction, basically unobstructed, because it's basically open desert, with the exception of a couple areas that are, basically forests. And as they're offloading some of the stuff into the house, Terry looks out at one of these tree lines and he notices this huge wolf, or what looks like a wolf, pretty well off in the distance, kind of meandering its way over towards them. But it's far enough off that this is not enough to be totally worried about it. After all, Terry was a rancher and his family were fairly rugged. They carried weapons and they were used to, protecting their livestock from predators. So this was not a, oh my goodness, I can't believe a wolf is near us. It was more like, okay, let's make a note that there's a wolf walking towards us. And so Terry does. He tells his family, "Hey guys, just so you know, there's a wolf coming towards us right now." And the whole family is now standing near the truck, and they're watching this wolf. And Terry recalled, as he's staring out, watching this wolf that's kind of almost walking in like a snake, like a serpentine path towards them from hundreds of yards out. It's still quite a ways out. Terry notices that there was a fence.
Just scared the skinwalkers with IRS tax evasion. They'll pay up.
Pretty big, and the spaces between posts were about 6 feet. When he had a good look at the wolf next to the fence, he could tell
glowing
that the
CIA
wolf was at
skinwalkers.
least 6 feet long. And he was thinking, are my eyes playing a trick on me? Like, that's an enormous wolf. That's the biggest wolf I've ever seen. But the wolf wasn't acting angry or aggressive. It was just kind of skulking its way towards them, very nonchalant, broad daylight. And at some point, Terry and the family, they're standing behind the truck, and Terry said that they all had this feeling that the wolf was not going to harm them. And the wolf got about 100 yards away, and Terry and his family are transfixed. And he even said he didn't understand why they weren't scared or why they weren't, running away or shooting at it or something, but they didn't. All of them are just standing there watching this wolf that's massive. And the wolf is wagging its tail and acting like a domesticated dog. The wolf comes over and goes up near Terry's father, who is there helping unload some of the gear.
I'm sure that'll be fine.
And Terry's father just kind of reflexively reaches out to start petting this. He's petting like up at his head level this massive wolf.
Yeah, pet it.
And
sure, it's fine.
The wolf just acts like a domesticated dog and kind of rubs against his hand, and then starts walking away from them, just wagging its tail and not doing anything, not causing them any harm, not snarling, not growling, nothing. But just as nonchalantly as it walked over to them, it walks over to where they had a pen with a couple of cows and calves inside of this pen. And one of the calves had its head through the post that was keeping them in this cage, just kind of watching this wolf. And the wolf notices it, and in an instant jumps over to this calf and immediately has the whole head of the calf in its jaws, just trying to rip it out of the cage. But it can't get it to squeeze through the cage. And so all of a sudden, Terry and his family are broken out of this weird trance. And Terry starts firing shots at the wolf. It strikes the wolf and has no impact. They run over, they start hitting it with the back end of an axe. They're trying to get this thing off of the calf because their livestock, that was their livelihood. And these are rugged people, and so they're trying to fight to save their property, to save their cows. And the wolf is just totally unaffected. It's not trying to attack Terry or his son that are trying to get rid of it. The wolf is just trying to attack the cow, but it won't let go. And finally, it just kind of gives up on the calf, starts kind of retreating.
Oh, hey, Shrimp.
Terry ends up getting his rifle, a high-powered rifle, and takes a shot at the wolf one more time. But again, it just has no impact on the wolf. And the wolf just,
don't take no shit.
At some point, just as, I guess, bored, turns around and kind of trots off into the woods. After they kind of were brought out of that initial trance, that they remembered this horrible smell, that's like foul, almost chemical smell that just permeated the whole area after the wolf was there. Terry and his son, they decided to go track this wolf because now there's this massive predator that's going to make owning cattle extremely difficult, and so they would have to go deal with this predator. And so instead of retreating into the house, they grab their weapons and they track the wolf that's now jogged off into the forest. And they make it to an area in the forest where the ground is very muddy and sodden. And Terry could easily make out these footprints that just suddenly stop. And they just couldn't make sense of it. And so they went back to the house and they told their family, like, we tracked it into the woods. There's no blood trail. There's nothing. It just walked in and vanished. So this is day one of being at this ranch, and they're all on edge now. The whole family is on edge. They really don't know what to make of that wolf. The sheer size of it, the fact that it was totally unaffected by being shot multiple times. You know, there's real concern over their own livelihood because they keep cattle and they're only going to have more that are going to be out in these pens. And if there are wolves that are 3 times the size of a normal wolf that are walking around killing cattle, that's a big problem if you own cattle.
Yes, it is.
So they're on edge, and they're all, in a way, trying almost not to talk about how crazy and how bizarre that encounter with the wolf was. They're just like, they're treating it like it's just a normal predator problem. Like, man, we gotta get those wolves, we gotta protect our cattle. But in the back of everybody's minds, they're like, something very strange is happening here. Gwen, she was having some other very strange things that were happening to her that she was not tying to the wolf thing. She was just noticing a couple of distinct things that were happening to her that made her think that she actually had a very real like medical problem, that she had, like, you know, true memory issues. Because 2 things happened. One, in that first week, she had gone to the grocery store, and when she came back, she put the groceries away, and then she left to go to the other room, and when she came back, all the groceries were now back in the bags. And so for like 20 minutes, she's just sitting there like dumbfounded with, did I put the groceries away? Same day, she goes to take a shower, and she hangs her towel in the bathroom like anyone would, and she takes a shower, and then when she gets out, the towel's missing. And she's like, she gets another towel and she towels off, and then she finds the towel hanging up in a closet on the other side of the house. And so between the groceries and the towel, she's like, is there something wrong with me? Am I like having a stroke? Am I having a medical issue here that I'm like literally losing my mind? And it wasn't until Terry actually had a similar experience that she started to wonder if this had to do with maybe that strangeness with the wolf, that maybe there's just something odd happening about this property. And it was Terry, in that first week, he had been digging holes for a new fence. And he had this big fence digging tool. It was about 70 pounds that he was using to dig the holes for the fence. And so he had taken a break after making a bunch of posts for this fence. He took a break, left his fence digging tool, you know, at the last place he had dug a post, and he went in to grab a bite to eat, came back out, and his fence digger is missing. And initially he just goes into the house and he's like, hey, you know, to his wife, to his kids, like, did you guys move my fence digger? Like, do you know what happened to it? Like, where is it? It's not out there. And they're like, no, we've been in the house the whole time. I have no idea. And so they couldn't find it. And a week goes by, and he's out patrolling his property looking for wolves. And in the tree, like well away from where he had been digging the post before, in the tree, his fence digging tool that's 70 pounds is like 70 feet in the air, strung up in this tree. So Terry comes back to the house and he tells his family about the fence digging tool being in the tree. And that's when Gwen tells Terry about her experiences with the groceries going back in the bag and a towel being moved around the house. And everybody in the family starts to really start being scared. We can't explain what's happening on this property, and we're very isolated. And what's the deal with all these locks on all the doors? I mean, they're starting to feel really concerned. Following the fence digging tool being found, Terry started to notice lights on his property. Initially, because this was the first couple of weeks they're there, he would see lights way at the far end of his property that looked like headlights, and he would think someone must have made a wrong turn that wound up on my property, and we were kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and they'll just leave. And so when he first started seeing these lights, that's what he assumed it was, just people making a wrong turn.
But you were wrong.
But he started to see it so often that he wondered if people were illegally hunting on his property. And so one night, he sees these lights on his property, and he goes out to investigate. And in fact, he's angry. You know, he's had all these strange things happen. His family's on edge. you know, and now he's mad and he's going to take it out on this person who's illegally hunting on his property. And he starts charging out to these lights, and he starts getting closer and closer, and he starts to realize it's not making any sound. If this was like a truck, it's not making any sound. And we're in an area where I could totally hear that if it was a vehicle, and he can't hear anything. And as he gets closer and closer, the lights start retreating from him without making a sound, and then float up into the sky and disappear. And Terry's like, what is going on here? The winter rolls around, and it's a particularly brutal winter. And one night he couldn't account for one of his cows, and so he's out looking for this one stray cow, and he searches his whole property, and there's only one area that he hasn't searched, and it's that forest where that giant wolf had disappeared after marching in there, and they tracked it in there. And so he goes in there, and as soon as he gets to the tree line, he notices there's a bunch of footprints from what looks like a cow. And he's relieved because it's probably his. He follows it into the woods, and much like the wolf that had just disappeared in that muddy, like sodden area in the forest, in the same spot,
Strong and his crew,
footprints that appeared to be this cow had also just, well, disappeared. And then over the course of the remainder of the winter, that would happen 4 more times. The animals would run away and just disappear without a trace. By the end of the winter, after all these animals have just mysteriously disappeared, Terry and his family, but Terry in particular, has really gone into full paranoia mode. He, at night, would just like stalk his own property, like hiding behind bushes with his weapon, and like hope to see what was taking his cattle. And so one night, as he's doing another fruitless search around his property, he catches out of his periphery what looks like a kind of mass of something moving around in the trees near his property. And at this point, he was kind of obscured by some shrubs and some plants. And so he kind of crouched down and looked out at the tree line. And he sees in the tree line this like strange shape kind of moving about inside of the trees. And he would describe the mass as looking almost like a stealth fighter jet, but really small. And it was making no sound, and it was hovering about 20 feet off the ground. And he's crouched down, not making a sound, watching it. And it's just kind of like moving around the tree line. And it has these lights it looks to be kind of scanning the ground. And it's just kind of moving around. It's shining these lights, these multicolored lights in the ground. And Terry moves a tiny bit to get a better angle on this thing. And he makes the tiniest of noises against the brush, just like a tiny little, barely audible sound. And this mass that's pretty far away, the lights immediately turn off, and it angles itself so it's facing directly at Terry. And Terry can feel it right away that it's heard this tiny little sound he's made, and now it's staring directly at Terry. And Terry's like terrified, and he's looking at this thing, wondering like, oh my God, like, is it gonna come take me? Like, what is this? Is this the thing that's been taking my livestock? And he's terrified, and he's staring at it, and it just flies away. By the spring of 1995, things have gotten really, really bad for Terry and his family. Now, not only are they losing livestock inexplicably, but they're showing up. The actual cows themselves are showing up back on their property, hours or days later, just kind of in random locations on the property, and they look like they've had surgery done, like precision cuts, and pieces of them are missing. And in addition, some very strange things are happening at the house. At night, they would see these entities walking around their property, these humanoid. They described them as having no expression, just walking around their property.
That's fucking creepy as shit.
And sometimes they would walk right up to the glass, put their hands on the glass, and look in, but there was no face. And like Terry and his family, they had blinds down, and they would use the deadbolts on every single door and window, but they could hear them rapping at the glass, and they could hear them communicating in a language they didn't understand right outside of their house. And this became so regular that it was almost impossible to sleep. Terry's kids started performing very poorly in school because they weren't sleeping. Terry's wife, Gwen, she lost her job at the bank because she wasn't sleeping, and she was like delusional. They were all just at an absolute breaking point. Terry is now feeling totally disheartened. One night he's sitting on his porch with his rifle, and he notices out on the horizon a new phenomenon. He was used to seeing the lights on his property that would be off in the distance that would disappear, and he had previously seen that kind of like fighter jet thing that was scanning the area. Like Those were two types of lights he would see, but there was a new light he saw as he's sitting on his porch. It was almost like this orangey orb that appeared off in the distance. Since he had his rifle with a high-powered scope on it, he just lifts up his rifle and he looks through his high-powered scope and he zooms in all the way, and he can see that this orb, he describes it as a portal. That as he's looking at it, it has almost like an oval shape to it, and even though it was nighttime, in the middle of the orange orb,
banjo music starts playing.
Sky. It's as if he's looking through a portal into another world where it's broad daylight and there's a sky.
Sorry, I'm just really intrigued about what Mr. Ballin is saying.
A black figure is crawling out of this portal.
That's
into his
fucking
property.
terrifying.
It's just like the black entities that were kind of basically walking around his property at night. In addition to these figures that are crawling, like imagine that scene from The Ring where the girl crawls out of the well. They're crawling out of this portal into his property and then scurrying away into the tree line. And he sees weird craft as well coming into his property through this portal, and then the portal shuts and disappears. Following this night with the
it sounds like you
portal,
got gas
Terry
leak,
started
bro.
to notice blue orbs that he and
if
his
not
family
gas
would
leak,
say
then you got
were
some
the
fucking rift
and
in
most
reality. Get out of
terrifying
there.
thing all of the things they experienced, and considering they had tall, featureless black humanoids peering in their windows and rapping on their windows, that's saying something. Okay, so a blue orb started showing up on their property, and the way they described it, Terry and his family, was whenever the orb came near you, it gave you this extreme sense of anxiety.
That's also a
It
hell
was
of a
almost
drug.
like it was emitting this feeling that you automatically got.
I mean,
where
this sounds like
suddenly
a
you
gas
were
leak to me.
unbelievably anxious and terrified
Like some kind
with
of
the blue
huge
orb.
gas leak causing
And
these
as
kind
soon
of
as it left,
hallucinations.
he would, not be anxious anymore. And so one night he's sitting on his porch like he had begun doing, and he sees this orb show up on his property. And his 3 dogs are sitting with him that see the orb. And
I mean,
they
if you
start
want to
growling
believe
and
it's
barking,
real, that's
and so
on
he
you.
lets his
And
dogs
there's
go,
plenty of stuff
thinking
in
that
the
maybe they
human
can
world and
scare this
human
thing
psyche
off.
that can
And the dogs
make
take
things
off
that are
running
not
towards this
explainable
blue orb.
easily. But
And they chase
I don't know.
it, and
I
you see
think
the orb,
fucking
Terry
gas
can see
leak.
the orb that starts to kind of retreat, and he's thinking, "Oh my goodness, I finally won something. My attack dogs are going to scare this orb away." And they chase off into the woods, and he sees this thing, the blue orb, retreat into the woods.
Could be ball lightning.
And then when he's thinking again that finally a little victory for us, he hears his dogs yelping, and he's too terrified to go check it out, and so he ends up going inside and locking the doors, locking the windows like they had been, and just kind of retreating. So the next day, when the dogs haven't returned, Terry and his son, they go out looking for the dogs in the forest. And when they get out there, they get to a clearing, and they find 3 stacks of ashes in like little burned out circles, as if there had been a fire previously in these 3 little spots. And it turned out it was the ashes of his 3 dogs that had gone into the woods. They had just been vaporized. Terry decides that it's time to leave, and he wants to sell the ranch. And so he puts the property up for sale.
You've done that already, bro.
Goes to a local news outlet, and he tells them about what's happening on his property. And as fate would have it, a billionaire by the name of Robert Bigelow, who had invested millions of dollars in standing up this scientific research team, this all-star team of PhDs, specifically to research what he described as high strangeness, which really is just paranormal. Basically, he was obsessed with the paranormal and wanted to investigate the paranormal. And he had actually seen that fairly obscure story. When he saw that it was up for sale, Robert Bigelow, the billionaire, saw this great opportunity to buy the piece of property and actually make it the headquarters of his own scientific research team. Not only to investigate what was happening on Skinwalker Ranch, but use it as kind of a hub to do other scientific research. So he purchases the ranch, and Terry actually, even though he did not want to spend any time at the ranch, on some level wanted to know what the research was going to show, because he was very curious.
I didn't have OBS open, otherwise I just would have hit the fucking,
it's been plaguing my family.
You know,
so he offers to
of
stay
my
on
mic,
as kind
but
of
I
like the ranch manager, because Robert Bigelow and his team are a bunch of scientists and business people. They don't have any experience on the ranch, and so they're happy to keep him. So Terry is still connected to the ranch, but at this point he's sold it to Robert Bigelow. So Robert Bigelow's scientific team was called the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS, N-I-D-S, NIDS for short. And Bigelow had actually built the team before purchasing Skinwalker Ranch, And what he went out and did is he recruited some of the most incredible scientists and PhDs he could possibly recruit, but he didn't want people that were interested in the paranormal.
Say no data.
He wanted people that were inherently skeptical.
Get out of here, YouTube.
So that if he was ever able to kind of prove the existence of high strangeness, that he would have credibility in doing that. And so he went out and found these incredibly skeptical,
you're calling it high strangeness?
scientists and PhDs. And so they move into Skinwalker Ranch, and the first thing they do is they need to start doing testing to make sure that this whole all the stories about Skinwalker Ranch coming from Terry and his family were not just some grand illusion by
illusion.
That, they could have just made it up.
I mean, mass hysteria is a thing too.
These tests. So that first year, as they're running these tests, which are largely things like, okay, let's check the environment and see if there aren't any plants that are giving off spores that could be hallucinogenic that they're breathing in. Let's check their water supply and make sure there wasn't something happening in their water supply. Let's do psychological assessments of the family. Let's ask neighbors. Let's do all of our diligence to make sure it's not something environmental or psychological.
Family terrorized by stalkers.
And over that first year,
true story.
While they're doing this research, there isn't much activity at the ranch, save a couple of instances where there were some strange lights. So that first year is fairly uneventful, but what's important is that the NIDS researchers come to a conclusion that this did not seem like a hallucination. This did not seem like a something coming from a plant or water supply. This seemed like the
great illusion having sticks flashbacks. Great song by the way. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Didn't know what it was. One day, Terry and actually Gwen, who was helping him, were tagging some of the new calves, the new cows that have been born, putting these little tags in their ears. And
I feel bad for those cows that are still there.
And so Terry and Gwen, they tag this new calf, put a yellow tag in its ear, and they move on, and they're tagging other animals. And so for about 40 minutes, their eyes and their attention are not focused on this one calf or that one area of the ranch. They're tagging other animals. And then their dog that was with them starts growling and reacting in the direction of where this calf had been. And so Terry and Gwen turn around and they look and they don't see anything. And they start walking over. They find the calf that they had tagged about 40 minutes ago has been basically surgically dissected. And all that's left are its legs and its head. And in addition, the ear where that tag was had been removed.
Wow.
And so they immediately call over the NIDS researchers. So the NIDS veterinarian comes over and looks at the scene and just can't make sense of it because the incisions on the calf were so well done that it looked like someone with real surgical expertise had done this on an operating table. There was no sign that this was done by a predator, and there was no blood anywhere. So this prompts a massive search of the property, because in many ways, this is what the NIDS researchers are looking for, are real occurrences of something that is highly strange that they can go investigate. And so all of the researchers and everybody there begins searching the property for whoever was responsible for this dissection of the cow. And they start searching the property, and the dogs, they had all these guard dogs that were kept at each of these observation posts that they had set up around the ranch as soon as the NIDS team had moved in. They were all looking in the same direction, all four of these four observation posts. And they're all cowering in the back of their cages, all looking in the same direction. And so they start making their way towards the tree line where all these dogs are looking. And they stop short when Terry says, "I see something in the tree."
I see
something.
They
stop their car and they're looking. And in the tree is this massive wolf, this like wolf-like humanoid that's basically perched on a tree limb.
Oh no.
And Terry takes out his rifle and he aims at the, the creature up in the tree, this huge creature. And everybody sees it. All the NIDS researchers are looking at this creature and they're like, oh my God, what is that? Terry starts firing at this thing,
that at all.
and it just disappears into the woods. And so the team charges into the woods, they fan out, and they pick up a couple of tracks of this huge thing that has like this massive footprint with these huge claws, but much like the wolf that had disappeared and the cattle that had suddenly disappeared when they went into the woods, they couldn't find any traces of this thing. But they did smell this horrible stench that Terry remembered smelling. It stuck with him that first day.
That really stinky smell, that stank.
on the very first day they were moving in. It was that same smell, but they couldn't find this huge animal. So dumbfounded, the NIDS researchers just go back to the property and no one can make sense of it. And you know, they have the footprint and they have their own eyewitness testimony, but like they couldn't make sense of how something that big
YouTube, why are you spinning though?
And so over the following month, they're like searching the property and they're looking for
We're still live,
signs of this huge creature.
You just see YouTube's previews just like spinning. I don't know why it's doing that.
The guard dogs consistently stayed in their kennels and did not want to come out. They were acting like they were kind of being hunted, and they were they were cowering quite a bit, and they were scared to go out in the open, but they couldn't find anything. So it was around this time that Terry and Gwen are kind of back to doing work around the ranch, and one day they're driving off to one section of the ranch and they pass by the corral where 4 of their prized bulls were. These are very expensive animals that are all in this enclosure. And so they drive past and they take a mental note that they're seeing these bulls in this enclosure, and they drive off to the other side of the ranch where they're doing some work, you know, tagging animals and, you know, building fences, whatever it is they were doing. But when they come back and they round a corner where they're first able to see that corral of bulls again, they are like, where are they? Because the bulls were not in their enclosure and they weren't anywhere. And so they're panicked because these are very expensive animals, and they run over, and Terry sees that the gates to the corral are still locked, but there's no bulls in there. There's no sign of a struggle or anything. And it just so happens that right next to the corral was this fairly small trailer that hadn't been used in years. In fact, it was literally wired shut. It was just sitting there. And Terry, just for whatever reason, runs over and looks in one of the windows. And inside of this tiny enclosure are these 4 bulls, completely calm, all crammed into this tiny trailer. They could barely fit. They're not fighting with each other or anything. They're just calmly sitting there as if they're in some kind of a trance. And Terry yells to Gwen, like, hey, they're over here. They're right here. And it like startles the bulls out of their trance. They start panicking and kicking, and they end up getting them out of this enclosure, and it takes them hours to finally round them up and get them back in the corral. But you know, they're unharmed. But it is almost impossible to get even one bull into that small of an enclosure. It would take hours to maybe be successful at doing that. To get 4 bulls into that enclosure was pretty much impossible. And to do it when they basically were calm after they were in there is also somewhat impossible. And it was important to note that Terry saw when he looked in the window that the only entrance to that trailer was wired shut still. It had not been undone. In fact, the cobwebs at the corner where the opening basically formed with the sides of the trailer, they were still intact, like it had not opened. And it made no sense how those bulls got in there. And so the NIDS researchers come over, and they can't make sense of it either. Upon further investigation, the NIDS researchers found that the bars of the corral that held the bulls, a section of it had been highly magnetized. And so while they're doing this research, trying to figure out if magnetic fields has anything to do with the strange occurrences at the ranch, 2 of the NIDS researchers were on the outskirts of the property using their compass to look for magnetic fields, and they started smelling. They both reported smelling that horrible metallic,
that horrible smell again, that smelly smell.
That other people had reported smelling anytime they saw that large wolf creature. And when they started smelling it, their compass started to flitter and then pointed away from north towards wherever the smell was. And they remember thinking that they felt like they were being watched. And it went on for a few moments, and their compass didn't waver. It was aimed in the direction of the smell, and they're both on opposite sides, pointing in the same direction. And then at some point, the smell stops, and they stop feeling anxious, and the north arrows go back to the way they should have been. And then one of the most terrifying of all of the paranormal occurrences that happened at Skinwalker Ranch happened at the very end of 1997. 2 NIDS researchers were up on a ridgeline overlooking the homestead. Okay. Every night it became commonplace to basically position NIDS researchers all over the property to basically be on the lookout for weird things that are happening. And these 2 researchers are up on this ridge, kind of obscured and hidden, and they see this orange orb take shape right near the homestead. And one of them had an infrared goggles, and so he looks down at the orb, and he can clearly make out that it's this oval-shaped opening that sounded an awful lot like what Terry had seen on his porch when he saw that humanoid creature crawling out of the portal into his property. Well, these two researchers are looking at this portal, and they see the same thing. They see this black human-like creature crawling out of this orange portal onto the ground, and then it starts running up the hill towards them. And they're like frozen with fear. They start smelling that horrible rotting metallic smell as this big human-like creature bounds up the mountain, and they can hear the shale under its feet as it runs up, creepy. And it goes right past them. About 30 feet away from them, they're looking at it, and it just barrels past them at a full sprint up into the mountains.
Oh, God.
The following year, in 1998, the activity on the ranch declined significantly. All they had was the occasional strange lights here and there, but for the most part, it was done. And in fact, even though NIDS remained on the property, by 2004, the research just wasn't amounting to anything, so they pulled the plug on the operation. They did have footage of a number of the lights that were seen, but again, no one's going to take a picture of some random lights and say, "Oh, there you go, proof." You know, they demonstrated that there were, you know, magnetic fields, and they have images of these calves that would reappear after looking like they'd had surgery done to them. They had hundreds of eyewitness reports. You know, they have all this information, but none of it was really definitive proof. Which was very frustrating to Robert Bigelow, to Terry and his family. And the way they described it is they felt like they were dealing with an entity or a group of entities that were just consistently one step ahead of them. That they could catch glimpses of what they were doing, but it was never enough to really understand what was happening. They never felt like they were in control. It was always clear that
damn Strong's working overtime
were in control of the situation, and they never were in a good position to really record hard data or get good footage. Not to mention, this is 1998, this is the late 90s. No one just had, like, you know, an iPhone they can pull out and snap pictures. You had like real cameras. And so the best they could do was some pictures of light and some of the animals that had been mutilated. There's been numerous books put together by some of the people that were a part of this NIDS research team, and to this day they believe that what they saw was a result of some paranormal activity. And to this day, many people believe that this is one of the most credible instances of paranormal activity occurring. So I'd love to hear what you think in the comments, whether you think this is a total fact or a total hoax or somewhere in the middle. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can message me on Instagram. My handle is JohnBallin416. Also, I post quite a bit on TikTok. My handle is Mr. Ballin. And that's going to do it, guys. I hope you got something out of this. And
we did, don't you worry, Mr. Ballin.
Do it. See ya.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our next video. We've got Skinwalker Horror Stories Animated. So let's watch this. This is from Merrily Horror Animations.
It was a dream of mine to travel to Albuquerque for the annual hot
Why
air
is it
festival.
your dream? No one goes to Albuquerque. They just get lost there.
To Mom many moons ago. Mom was finally ready to take us there, just us girls. She wanted to relive the adventure. We decided to rent an RV from the trip from LA to New Mexico. My mom and I took turns driving, and it wasn't too shabby. An AC, kitchen, comfortable beds, and a bathroom. It was the perfect road trip. As we approached Albuquerque, it was already almost midnight.
Many moons ago.
I knew we had to be getting closer to the campgrounds.
You lived in Albuquerque, Strong? Did you see Bugs Bunny
often?
often?
The directions, but the GPS was lagging, and we ended up lost. We should have timed it better. Venturing out after sundown wasn't a smart idea.
He always takes that wrong turn at Albuquerque to wherever the fuck he's going.
We managed to come across a beat-up shack with its lights on and music playing. Are you an idiot?
Creepy.
Since when is stepping out of your vehicle in the middle of nowhere a good idea? I know we're getting close to the RV park.
Albuquerque is cool.
I just need to know which road will take us there.
Strong makes sense.
Mom, will you come with me? You are an idiot. Stop it, you two.
Oh.
We're here to enjoy each other's company.
Something's out
there. You can
there.
stay here if you want, Anna. We're only asking for directions. Fine. But bring the pepper spray and gun with you. My mom followed me while Anna sat in the driver's seat and kept watch, pistol in hand. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Maybe they're asleep. After what felt like an eternity,
maybe they're having a siesta.
We heard footsteps slowly approaching the door.
Who knows?
Who is it? You shouldn't be out here this late. I'm sorry, ma'am. Why is it a day for night shot
now?
Know how to get to the nearest RV park. Well, I'm not opening my door. It's not safe at these hours. What do you mean? You're not from around here, so listen closely. Drive left for about 2 miles until you reach an intersection. Then make a left for another mile. Then a right, and then an immediate left. You'll see the signs. You got that? Yeah, typed it out on my notes app. Thank you, kind stranger. And one more thing. If you hear any screams, if you see any animals, keep on driving. Don't stop. Don't look at it.
Don't stop.
Okay.
Don't look at it.
A witch-like creature roams these parts.
A bruja.
One that can shapeshift into any animal. Don't acknowledge it when you see it. Have a good night.
Yeah.
And make sure you don't turn right at the intersection.
Mm.
We got back in the RV and Mom read out the directions while I drove in the dark. This is really dangerous.
Yeah, no shit.
It's pitch black. We have the moon and the stars. It'll be alright. Donna is an excellent driver and is really careful. My palms were sweating, thinking about what that woman told us. I made sure to keep my eyes focused ahead and drove slowly.
Yeah.
Which way now? Right turn after this intersection. You know, if we die out here, no one is going to die. Stop being so negative. You're only making things worse. Excuse me? This is all your fault. You're the one who took a long time taking pictures of the Grand Canyon. Guess what? No one on Instagram gives a shit about where you've been. You little fart face. Ooh,
no, fart face.
So badass.
Stop!
Oh.
What was that? Shh. I stopped the car and looked ahead, trying to figure out if I hit something.
Don't stop. That
Can
was
one of you look out the back window to see if I hit something? Fine. Anna walked to the back of the RV and looked out the window.
What a mistake that was.
Drive! Now! Go, go, go! I stepped on the pedal and sped away. Anna ran to Mom and started hyperventilating. She looked like she just saw a ghost and told me to keep driving.
Don't turn right.
Luckily, after more circling around and a minor hiccup, we finally reached the RV park. I was happy to see other people finishing up their barbecues and cleaning up. I was tired and looking forward to bed. Just a few more hours until sunrise and the hot air balloon festival. Dad would have loved to be here. A tinge of sadness washed over me as I remembered his passing.
Yeah.
Yet I dared not mention it to either of them, in fear of upsetting them. We were doing this in his memory, and felt he would appreciate us remembering him this way. I got ready for bed, and was going to take out the garbage.
About any of it, so.
Don't go out there. What's up with you? Anna looked really pale. She explained what she saw earlier. It was the scariest thing I've ever seen. As soon as I looked out the window, I saw this man crouched down on the road. And in the blink of an eye, the man was gone, and in his place was this beast on all fours chasing us. But it was as if it were half man, half beast, with wolf skin and a wolf head with glowing eyes and sharp claws. Is that why you screamed? What? I didn't scream. I could have sworn I heard her scream in the RV. We tried to comfort her.
Is there something in there with them?
I debated whether or not I should step outside, but decided to just do it, since I had been putting it off for far too long.
And the car's just starting to
stink. My main
stink.
obligations during the trip were driving and garbage. I stepped outside and looked for the dumpster.
Oh, no.
I ran as fast as I could there and back. But when I was approaching the RV, I noticed scratches on the back of the vehicle and what looked like blood. I suddenly felt like I was being watched, but shrugged it off. As I was entering the RV, I saw something. From my peripheral vision, in the darkness, I saw an animal unlike anything I'd ever seen before.
It's a skinwalker.
I quickly shut the door. What's wrong with you now? I saw it. We need to leave. I agree. What? But you haven't experienced the hot air balloons yet. But it's okay. If you don't feel safe, then it's best we leave. Anna and I looked at each other and felt guilty. Mom has been really depressed since Dad's passing. This trip was mainly for her. We decided that we'd leave right after the festival and headed to bed.
Yeah, why do you stay there, though?
We woke up before sunrise. That way, we would be the first guests at the festival and find a place to park the RV. It was Mom's turn to drive, and I slept in a little more.
Oh no. Mom's gonna go the wrong way.
That was until... I immediately got out of bed. Mom was driving as fast as she could and screaming. Anna and I ran to the passenger seat. The creature. I looked away as soon as I saw it and yelled for them to do the same. But I'll never forget what I saw. In that split second, I got a good look at it. It looked really odd. It was as if a man had taken a wolf, skinned it, and wore its fur and head as clothing. And he had really, really long limbs. Running on its hind legs at the same speed as the RV. My heart was beating out of my chest. And I thought I was going to have a heart attack when I heard it scratching on the side of the RV. Mom sped up and started praying as loud as she could. Anna was crying hysterically. I kept reminding her to breathe and to keep her eyes on me. I looked at it for a second and saw its bones crack and reform as it started running on all fours. Its body was all covered in fur now. And in about 3 seconds was now what appeared to be a wolf. And it miraculously ran off into the woods out of view. A few seconds later, we heard the police sirens and were pulled over for speeding. I never thought I'd be so relieved to be in trouble with the law. We explained what we saw, and the policeman had a serious look on his face. He decided to not give us a ticket and let us go with just a warning. To get out of the area as soon as possible and to not look back. I'm sorry, guys, but we're not going to the festival.
Yeah, no shit.
Mom kept driving until we were out of Albuquerque, and she didn't stop. We should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque. Maybe this could have all been avoided.
So they didn't take the right turn after all. Okay. Nice. Good quality content. But we're called the Tar Heel State. Nice, Cindy. Watch this. This is called Skinwalker disguised as goat. This is like a small TikTok thing. I saw this and yeah, let's watch it. I know it looks weird. It's one of those weird TikTok videos. Look at this goat. Where's its ears at? Why its eyes look like that, though? Goat eyes usually don't look like that. That's kind of creepy. I mean, it's still... I'm sure it's just a normal-ass goat, but why it looks so weird, though? What going on, goat? Why you look this way? What going on? Why you got human eyes? Why don't you have your regular old goat eyes? What's this shit? Glitch in the Matrix. Let's watch it one more time. Just for you to see that. Because it's weird. Why are you looking that way, though? Pretty sure it's just, again, a normal scope, but it just looks weird. Those eyes are wrong. Yeah. Ew. I don't know. That's gives me the creeps. All right, last video for tonight. That will last us a little while longer. It's 6 Scary Skinwalker Horror Stories by Swamp Dweller, excuse me. So let's take a listen to these.
There's something lurking in the shadows. calling your name, whispering to you, trying ever so desperately to get you to walk past that tree line. But never fear, never listen, and never waver. Welcome back to the swamp, my friends. It's good to see that you made it back for another episode, and welcome if you're new.
Did we welcome?
Today I'm going to be sharing some creepy and allegedly true encounters with skinwalkers, sent in by viewers just like you. As always, if you have a story that you would like to share in a future episode, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I'd love to share your story.
Also, that video Strog posted in
stories like yours that
the
really
Spook
help
House is like over 2 hours long,
basis.
so we're not watching that tonight.
Now, without any further ado, let's get into these creepy and allegedly true skinwalker encounter horror stories that'll freak you out tonight.
But I definitely recommend you watch that if you are interested.
So there are those who have seen and encountered cryptids such as Wendigos, skinwalkers, or Sasquatches. But this is gonna be my encounter with what I think was a skinwalker, but could be something else. This is the best way I can describe, as something you wouldn't expect as a cryptid, but as something from a horror movie. We'll start off at around 6 in the afternoon. I was in my backyard. It was a good day, and we had 3 acres. And then it hit dense forest. I was sitting on the porch, in the swing, enjoying the nearly 50-degree weather with my 2 dogs. It was all normal until 2 hours later, when my dogs suddenly perked their ears up and stared into the forest.
Also, first to play, Ohio can suck it up.
They had that look of seeing something they don't like. This occurred for around 30 seconds.
The brothers were from Ohio, but they had to go to North Carolina to actually have flatland to start getting off the ground.
Until the barking was dwarfed by some demonic scream or shriek. I jumped to attention as my blood went cold. The barking of my dogs turned to sharp yelps. Thinking fast, and knowing that there were dangerous animals in the area, such as coyotes, wolves, bears, etc., I grabbed a hatchet that was located on a pile of logs, and a flashlight. I sprinted to the forest, hoping I was in time. Not just a second later, when I got to the edge, my dogs bolted back to the house, yelping and whimpering as they ran. Then, everything went dead silent.
There
was not a single noise. I could probably hear a cricket move. It's as if every living creature just died all at once. Being prodded by curiosity, I went out 30 feet into the forest when I felt that something was following me. I then stopped to test my theory, and to my sheer horror, the sounds of heavy footsteps stopped a split second after mine. I was shaking like a leaf at this point. I didn't move for about 2 minutes until those footsteps started moving, but going around me in circles this time. Judging by the sheer crunching of the leaves, twigs, and branches, this thing had to be a bear at least. Then they stopped abruptly in front of me. What I did next was something I hated myself doing up until this day. I turned my flashlight on, and it moved in front of me. This thing was there, standing there. It was easily 8 feet tall with bone-white skin that was so stretched on the body frame it looked almost like it was going to split at any second. It was humanoid in appearance. That was except for its abnormally long arms and face. Its head was human-like, but its eyes were completely gone. They were just concave, soulless sockets, and its lower jaw was split in 2 and connected by muscle. I watched as this thing's lower jaw would split open and then close back, making a bony clicking noise. I stepped backwards, and a loud crack of a branch emanated from beneath me. I looked down to see a branch split in 2 beneath my feet. When I looked up again, this thing's head was looking at my direction. I yelped involuntarily, and this thing let out another, long, ear-piercing scream as its lower jaw stretched out left and right. I don't even remember what happened next, because I just sprinted back to the safety of my house. Hearing the heavy footsteps right behind me, I got back to the house with all of my breath gone. I suddenly remembered that my phone was recording. I looked back to the forest to see if it was following me. To my surprise, the thing was not there. It must have stopped following me when I reached the border of the forest. I don't know if this was a skinwalker, I don't know if it was a Wendigo, a fleshgate, or what.
A fleshgate?
It was downright terrifying. Okay, first off, I know a lot of people will think that this is a hoax, because it's from Scotland, but I don't know how else to explain this. I'm extremely familiar with Wendigos, skinwalkers, fleshgates, all that. There's probably a non-Native American possibility that I'm unaware of, but the only explanation to me is a skinwalker. I apologize for my use of Scot slang in advance. I'm a teenager. I won't disclose my age exactly, and I go to a public school in Perthshire, Scotland. It's mostly a rural area, with mostly towns, villages, and just houses dotting the landscape. Although there are 2 major cities in my area, the high school I go to is in a medium-sized town, and for privacy reasons, I will not disclose its name. Not many people have had many paranormal encounters, although a few people claim to have seen ghosts and whatnot. Anyways, on to my encounter. I live in a large house in the middle of a field with my family. It's not too far from the town I go to school in, but I usually take the bus
much more
just
horrifying,
in case,
a furry.
and honestly, just because I'm lazy. Sometimes, me and my mates, let's just call them E, J, and C, take a path through a nearby forest to come back to my place, where we just play video games and that sort of thing. This night, my parents were out of town, and we decided to drink a bit of booze that we had in the mini fridge in my room. I didn't try much. I'm not much of a drinker, and beer's not really my thing.
Wow.
Or C's, really. E and J, however, they went all out. It got late, or rather early, and they decided to leave and head home. I said bye to them, and then headed back up to my room to play some more video games. Roughly about a half an hour later, I heard a loud banging on my door. It was J and E. I let them in, and they started panicking. C goes home a different way than them. He lives a bit closer than the others. E and J said that they both were walking through the woods, and they saw a tall, skinny-looking bloke pelting towards them. They panicked and legged it back to the house until the skinny fella gave chase. My mind went back to another friend of mine, somewhat of a paranormal buff. They told me about Wendigos
so that's the
and
bigger thing,
skinwalkers.
Cindy. I see.
I
was
called
curious about the
999,
Tar Heel thing
which is
myself.
basically
It's
911
because
in America, and said that
North
a prowler was
Carolinians
looking
basically
around our
produce
house and had chased my
turpentine tar,
friends
like
all
you
the way back
said.
to my
It's from
house.
pine trees, though.
I gave the operator
neat.
my address and
Nice.
said that they'd have a car to my house very soon. Apparently, there was a big
So
traffic
that's
accident,
definitely a
so
name
soon
for
really
North
meant in the
Carolinians, especially
meantime.
along with, if it's not Tar Heel,
This
it's
lady on the
Rosen, like
dispatch,
Rosin
though,
Heel,
told
or
me to arm
O-S-I-N
myself,
Heel, because
lock
it's
all
from
the
rosin
doors
trees where
and
you get
windows,
turpentine
and lock myself in a
tar and
room.
pitch.
So that's what we did. We grabbed knives in the kitchen, barricading ourselves inside my room. After some time, we heard heavy footsteps around our house. Thinking it was the police, I peered out the window. What I saw was much worse. It was E. It looked the same as her anyway.
But it's
I
not.
knew
It's a
that she
mimic.
was sitting, crying in my room. I freaked out, and it saw me. What the hell is that thing? Whatever the
Something
heck
you
was
probably
outside
shouldn't
could
go
speak,
near.
and it sounded exactly like Jay. It was a skinwalker for sure. I remember
A
the
Texas
description
skin
from my other
ranger.
horror friend. It looked like my friend, but sounded like my other friend. It must have been confused, and that made it so much more scary. We heard sirens and the thing ran off into the woods very abruptly. We told the police officers everything. They checked it out, but I don't think they really believed us. The officers left, saying the woods were clear, and then muttered something about stupid prank callers. After they left, we heard inhuman shrieks, but
You're scared of the
still,
old ones?
they were sort of human-like.
Oh, like
We didn't
Shub-Niggurath
sleep much that
Strog?
night.
Scared
I
of
believe
that?
that what we saw was a skinwalker, and I hope to God Almighty that I never have to face that bloody thing again. So I've been kind of wanting to share my creepy encounters and experiences for quite some time. But what my sister told me a few days ago made me want to share this possible skinwalker encounter. I'm a Native American, and so is my father and siblings,
Okay.
of course.
Well, yeah.
My mom isn't very much Native, but there's a little bit there in the bloodline somewhere. We aren't involved with any tribes in specific, but I do enjoy looking, reading, and trying to be active in the Native culture. There are also plenty of tribes in the state I live in.
Okay. Probably
a few
Oklahoma,
weeks ago,
I guess.
I was asking my dad about the tribes around here, and asking if there was a possibility that skinwalkers could be here. He kind of avoided the question entirely, but did tell me that a tribe up north was notorious for murders, both by members and unexplained ones. I tried seeing if I could get any more answers from him, but there was nothing else. Now, time for my encounters. Both my sister and I experienced them most, but my brother has also had some unexplained scratching and whispering at night. It was rare, but it did happen.
If it can invade your home undetected, it's a serious threat with little solutions. Yeah.
Now, me and my sister share a room. She's always feared the dark, so being the nice big brother I am, I have shared my room with her for quite some time. Anyways, it was around maybe 11 p.m. when me and my sister heard a weird sound. It sounded like a bird call, but it wasn't normal.
Skinwalkers come out
like
in
someone
June.
with strep throat trying to mimic a crow.
Well, it's July now.
Both me and my sister kind of just looked up from our phones and gave each other a weird look. We live in an apartment complex that's located at the edge of a small town. The town is known for being a druggie town, so, for the first hour, we thought it was just some druggie outside tripping out.
But you were wrong.
It lasted about 3 hours, ending sometime around 2 a.m. My sister had fallen asleep and everything went quiet. But then, I heard the big dogs down the road start barking like absolute crazy people. I thought it was just weird timing, or they saw an animal. But looking back, I think it might have been the skinwalker. A few weeks go by, and the same sound starts up randomly again at around 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. one night. It would usually end around 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., give or take. At first, me and my sister didn't really pay attention to it, and eventually thought it was just some sort of weird bird. But
well,
one
you
night,
were wrong.
I had slept over at my friend's house, which was a trailer on the edge of the town right near mine. Me and my friend were just about to fall asleep on the couches when I heard that same sound. I sat straight up and looked at my friend. "You heard that, right?" I asked her, thinking it was imaginary. "Yeah, sounded like a bird. Why?" She told me back, probably thinking I was crazy. "Oh, it's nothing. I just hear things sometimes," I replied. If I told her, she probably would have believed me, but I just tried to make it seem like it was nothing. That night, the sound lasted until I fell asleep. Fast forward another week, and we're hearing the same sounds at night. My sister now was starting to get paranoid. I was too, but I just told her it was nothing, just a dumb bird. At this point in the summer, I was listening to lots of Skinwalker horror stories that were on the Swamp Dweller YouTube channel. I started connecting their similarities to what was happening with me and my family. One night, me and my sister were just chilling in our beds, with our window open, when the noises started up again. This time they sounded like they were ragged and sick. They stopped quickly after they started. Me and my sister just shrugged at each other and went back to our phones as normal, when suddenly, right next to our window, we can hear the most blood-curdling scream. It was not human. It sounded like a baby screaming crossed with a dog yelping. With that sound ringing in our ears, me and my sister both jumped and screamed, hiding under her covers. I honestly hid under my covers, with my heart racing. We waited what seemed like hours until my sister whisper yelled at me asking if I was safe. I had to put my big boy pants on and uncover myself to close the window. I did so rather quickly, but when I got to the window, there was nothing there. Nothing I could see. My sister wanted to tell our parents, but I knew they would never believe us. The next day, though, I had asked if they had heard anything, which they said they hadn't. I brought this stuff up to my 3 friends one night while having a sleepover. At first, most of them thought it was a joke, and me just trying to scare them or something. I explained how I felt I was being followed and having a sense of dread 24/7. They then seemed to believe me.
Now they believe
me. It would follow me to their houses
as
well. And what freaked us out the most that night
was
my friend's dog started barking and growling like crazy. Afterwards, one of my friends had remarked, "Why did we become friends with a Native American?" It made us laugh and calm down the atmosphere.
Why did we become friends with a native?
Back home, my sister had told me that the noises stopped while I was gone, which pretty much had confirmed to me that it was indeed following me in specific. Constantly now, I was feeling dread and couldn't sleep at night. That scream ringing in my ears and that sound outside, increased by each night, sounding more and more sickly. Like I said, this had been lasting all summer, so eventually we got used to it. Sometimes it sounded like there was more than one of them.
Nature Master
but
Bob.
If it didn't get close, we didn't care. At my friend's house, it was still the same. I was paranoid of seeing it. Even walking my dogs at night freaked me out because their gaze would fixate on something in the tree line, just out of my sight. They would never bark or anything like that. Just stare, then start sprinting towards home. I'd begin to follow, of course, gripping the leash so they wouldn't get away. It really freaked me out. One night, I caught a glimpse of it through the curtain crack. The noise had gotten closer,
the Skinwalker,
and me and my sister were
Texas
prepared to
Skin
hear
Ranger.
another of those terrible screams. But no. I looked out the window as the wind blew, and what I saw, I believe, is a skinwalker. It looked so sickly and thin. Its eyes were sunken, and its face looked like it was scowling. I just stared at it until the curtain moved back, and then it was gone. This dread had filled me even more. After that, we heard less and less. Toward the end of the summer, we had heard it again, and I decided to record the sound. It sounds very weird and very unnoticeable in the recording, but if you listen closely, it's there.
Did you send it?
I wish there was a way to show it on here, but everything had died down until recently. I still have that constant feeling of dread, and I've become more and more paranoid. But I know what I've been
we're not gonna hear the
experiencing.
sound?
I know
Great.
something about it is real. Last month, me, my siblings, and my dad saw a white deer. I know that usually means good luck, but just the other day, after my dad picked me up from work, he told me that on the way he had seen a white wolf sitting on the side of the road, just watching the cars.
Oh boy.
I don't know if this is significant, but it's something to note. Also, my sister has been experiencing stuff while in her room. Just last week, she came running out of my room, saying she heard scratching at the window. It's all just super freaky and weird. I'm already kind of paranoid, but this is all just weird and it can't be coincidences. I just hope it stops. I'd love to get a good night's sleep again. When I was younger, I preferred to spend time at my great-grandmother's house rather than my own. I lived with my grandmother at the time. My grandmother was right next door, actually. This would often let me spend the night with my great-grandparents to get me out of her hair. My great-grandparents had their own bedroom on one end of the house, and on the other end was the room that I slept in. This bedroom was big to a 6-year-old, or even a 7-year-old, with a large bed that had sliding door cabinets for a headboard, and 2 large windows, one of which had a crate with older toys in it, mostly building blocks and the like. That faced the side yard, which had several young pine trees. The other window faced the large barn out back that housed their camper and all manner of other things. Before I continue, I ought to mention that I'm a quarter Native American, of the Miami tribe.
My
mother was adopted by a family whose heritage was distinctly French. While my grandmother wanted my mother and I to have nothing to do with our heritage, my great-grandmother embraced it and never kept it from us, and even taught us a little bit about it. Me, far less than my mother, since I was too young to understand much before she passed. One night, when I was sleeping over at my great-grandparents' house, I woke up to the motion-detecting floodlight in the barn.
That's not a good sign.
The room was flooded with light, and I could see everything clear as day. I was unable to go back to sleep. I got up and decided to play with the blocks until the floodlight went out, and I could go back to sleep again. For some reason, I felt the strange urge to look out the window into the side yard.
What a mistake
so
that
I climbed
was.
up on the crate under the window and peered out. There, in the side yard, was a young man. He was in his late teens, 17 or 19 if I had to guess, with neatly cut straight black hair, nearly ear length. He wasn't dark-skinned, but he wasn't exactly white either. He wore what looked like tan Carhartt coveralls, and he appeared to be examining a young pine tree, not more than 15 feet from the window. The tree wasn't very tall, maybe 8 or 9 feet, but the young man was carefully moving the bottom branches this way and that, as if it were looking for something. I watched him for about a minute or two, simply observing. I didn't feel frightened, rather I was curious. Then the young man lifted his head and looked around. When he saw me, the strangest thing happened. He looked startled, almost terrified. His eyes widened so far that I could make out the whites in the low light. There is no other way to explain what occurred after that, other than me sounding crazy. I swear, on everything, he turned into a deer and bolted away into the darkness. He simply turned to his left, made the drop to all fours, and was a deer by the time that he would have had his hands hit the ground. He ran off back beyond the barn. I don't remember the conversation I had with my great-grandmother about it in the morning, only that she seemed upset and was tight-lipped about it, and that she and my great-grandfather went out to look at all the trees later that day. They didn't seem to find anything, and my grandmother didn't want to hear about it any further, so I shrugged it off. Years later, I would learn what skinwalkers are. I would think back to that young man and how he could have been a native, how his coveralls could have been deerskin. I would also like to think that my experience didn't line up with most other skinwalker encounters. I didn't feel any fear. I didn't notice a stench. No one called my name. Also, the young man seemed to be afraid of me. Then again, I suppose if I were looking for something and I saw a small child staring at me, I'd be a little freaked out too. As time went on, I had for the most part convinced myself that I just happened to have witnessed a teen boy hunting illegally on our property, and my startling him was probably him just realizing that he had been caught. Maybe the deer I saw was what he was after anyway, and my child brain just processed it strangely.
He was a Native American morph.
Until I decided to bring up the concept
trying to stop the
skinwalkers
Yerks
with my mother. I had told her that I could have possibly seen one when I was a child if my memory could be trusted. When she said, "Oh, you saw the bird man too."
The bird man?
My belief, what I misremembered as a teen boy hunting, shattered. She wouldn't say much about it when I seemed confused, simply stating, "Oh, there was an old balding man who would dance around the roof with his belt made of feathers, and when I would go out there to yell at him for being so loud, he'd smile at me and fly off as a bird." That house was on land that was tribal before the family. I was adopted into and moved into the area several generations ago. Artifacts coming to the surface every other time the big field behind my childhood was plowed. Many others have had experiences there, including others of my own. Though most of the other experiences seemed more surreal, they seemed to be things that could be brushed off as coincidence or me psyching myself
Why
up
do
to
those
see or
ones not
believe
seem
something that
evil?
wasn't actually there.
They seem like they're normal
But that
people
young
compared to
man
the
who
others,
turned into a
then.
deer sticks
That's
with
weird.
me, and has honestly led me to be distrusting of deer, and not just because they're a road hazard. I have had many other strange
Deer are
experiences
just
with
fucking
deer
huge
since
rats.
then, but none as
I don't hate them,
unbelievable
but they
as the
are just
shapeshifter
kind of
in the
pain in
coveralls.
the ass. Tasty. They're tasty, delicious, huge rats, but they can act like rats. There's so many of them most of the time.
So I was chilling at home, and my friends
So
were
I
out
was
hiking.
chilling at home, and
I
then
wasn't
chills
invited
came
because I
on,
had
and I
college
got
courses
really
that
mad
day.
because I hate
But when
his
they
voice.
came back, they recited an experience to me that was so horrifying I just had to share it on the show. So, my friends, including my best friend Brandon, was hiking around Cherokee National Park, and before they knew it, the sun had set. Brandon was trying to get down to a second part of their trail faster, and he slid down the side of a hill. Little did he know, his pocket ripped and his phone fell out of his pocket. He didn't know until about 15 minutes later when he went to text somebody and couldn't find it. They were already back where they were at this point, but they used Snap Map to see where his phone fell. He ran back to get it and picked it up.
You
and
have
placed
to
it
shine a
securely in an
flashlight
unripped
on them to
pocket
kill the
until he heard
anamorph
a
deer
blood-curdling
man.
scream.
Yeah.
He's had similar experiences in the past,
We
but
watched
not this
that whole
close.
fucking series.
At first, he thought it was a mountain lion.
At least the
until
Nickelodeon
they
one that was like
distinctly yelled,
Y7 or whatever.
"Over here!" He
What if
walked
they'll ever
up to the
remake like an
incline
Animorphs
and
TV
looked
show?
between the
I
trees
doubt
to
it.
see where the sound was coming from.
But
And
it'd
across
be
the
interesting
way,
if they did.
he saw
They
what
actually
looked
get,
to be
like,
a man
closer to the
standing
books
on a
and
neighboring
not
mountain.
cancel
The
it.
scream stopped.
But I mean,
and
that
he
is a
just stared
statue of the
over
fucking product
at
of the
Brandon,
90s.
an unmoving silhouette. This continued for a few seconds before Brandon's
Wow,
fight
guy
or
outside
flight
my house
suddenly
who's
kicked
going
in,
down the hill. Can
and
you
he
turn
went
your
with
high
it and
beams
just
down?
started
I know the
running as
window's
fast
open,
as he
but
could
Jesus.
back to the meeting grounds.
Can you not?
He looked back once and recited to me that the eyes of whatever was chasing him were reflective and too big to be a mountain lion of sorts.
It's not that
He ran
fucking
for
dark
about
out.
8
The
minutes
lights are
before
on.
he ran into two other of the friends that were on the trip. Caleb and Alex, and they were like, "Dude, what's wrong? Chill out."
Dude, what's wrong? Chill.
Brandon wastes no time explaining to them what happened, and he just says, "Just freaking run." And so they all did. They ran for another 10 minutes, all the while the three of them exclaimed that they kept hearing screams, all in different tones of voices, male, female, etc. They finally got back, still feeling like they were being chased and watched. They urged everybody to just get in the car. After that, they sped off and never looked back, and they still have never gone hiking back at that spot. To me, this sounds just
the
like
Anamorphin Power Rangers.
But what do you guys think? Because I know, since they're Navajo creatures, they mostly reside in the Midwest areas. But I just don't know what else this could have been. We're in East
they go
Tennessee.
past that too.
I live the furthest out from all of my friends, 25 minutes from the nearest town, and walking distance from the Cherokee Park border.
Yeah, the Cherokee have them too, buddy.
This happened to me last August, when I was driving down from Washington to San Diego with some friends.
Why would you want to
The three
drive
of us
to San
were camping
Diego?
in cool spots along the way, and at one point during our trip we stopped to camp for a night near the Sierra Nevada mountains.
Oh no.
My friends
What
had
a
heard
mistake.
that the sunrise's reflection over the mountains is absolutely breathtaking, so we decided to wake up around 5 a.m. the next morning to give it a watch. That time came, and we reluctantly left our tent and walked about 10 minutes from our remote campsite over to a long road and stretch of desert with a great view of the mountains. We stood there for roughly 20 minutes or so. Then, as I was looking across the distance, something caught my eye. It seemed to be some type of animal, but it was a weird size and very white, super white. At first, I thought it was a bunny, but then decided that there was no way, because it was way too large to be that. The figure was maybe the size of a large dog, bright white, and moved in a kind of unnatural way, like jerky and fast.
No.
I remember the face being weird, kind of indescribable. It gave me goosebumps as I stared at it, trying to figure out what I was seeing. I looked over to my friends and asked them if they were seeing the thing too. When I looked back, I couldn't see it anymore.
It was
Neither
gone.
of my friends had seen this figure.
Vanished.
But they shared a look, and one of them did a motion like two fingers walking on his arm. The other nodded, and they told me they didn't know what it was, but we should go back to our campsite.
You should leave, now.
After that experience, I asked them several times what they weren't telling me. I kind of thought they were playing a joke on me, but I was still persistent with my questions. They told me to drop it until we made it to San Diego, and promised they would explain it when we got there.
Yeah, you'll be safe in San Diego
as we drove into San
compared
Diego
to
late at night,
anywhere else.
I brought it up again. That's when I learned about the Skinwalker for the first time.
Sorry,
They told me that they've read stories that sound exactly what I saw, and noted how it was weird that I would describe a figure like that when there were no animals known in that region to even look like that.
Well, duh, it's a skinwalker.
And they thought it was weird that I would describe a Skinwalker down to a T without ever even hearing of it before. I was absolutely freaked out, and I was glad they waited to tell me.
Yeah.
They told me that they waited to share because they didn't want to risk anything by thinking or talking about it.
Because it's
I'm not sure if I saw the Skinwalker that day, or maybe if my tired eyes were playing tricks on me. I'm just definitely not eager to return to that area anytime soon.
No shit.
So, to start off, I live in rural Idaho.
Oh boy.
Farmlands and woods for thousands of miles.
Plenty of potatoes.
Now, at this time, I was 20 years old, and I and a few friends decided to go camping. Like all great ideas, we also brought along with us guns and liquor.
Oh, great.
Most of us owning lifted trucks, we headed deep into the Pacific Northwest woods.
Uh-huh.
We drove random trails for hours looking for that perfect spot, far enough from anyone and anything to avoid the law enforcement and bothering
I'm
anybody
fine
else.
with both guns and
came upon
alcohol,
a
but you
small
shouldn't
cabin at
combine
some
them.
point and decided that this would be a great spot to camp. This is an old trapper's cabin left over from who knows what year.
Oh, good.
Logs were grayed and cracked. The roof had been taken over by moss of the woods.
Yeah,
and the
that
tree
sounds like a
decided
great
its
idea.
roots
Go with
needed
this
a new home,
random-ass
because
cabin.
It was really growing into the side of
The
this building.
must-haves. Yeah.
Regardless, this place, thinking back on it, was rather odd.
No fucking...
The door was dug down about 2 feet, so the whole cabin looked like a 10-year-old would be the builder. Yet inside, you could stand up easily. My friend JC called to look.
My friend
as me and
Jesus
him went inside to check out what we had found. As I wandered over, he looked at me in this kind of sickly manner. He looked nearly green. What's up, man?
What's up, JC?
Bro, check this out.
Bruh.
Have you ever seen so many dead animals?
Oh boy.
At this, I picked up my pace a little. I mean, the last thing we need to be is near a wolf den or cougars, banquet area, or something like that. What the hell?
Yeah, why there's so many dead corpses, though?
I thought we might be standing in a mudding pit. This was no longer an option.
No.
Looking into this creek bed area to see, I guess, around 5 deer, 2 elk, maybe half of a moose, and I think a few raccoons.
Jesus.
All dead and torn apart. Guts
that's a good
splayed
sign.
all around. The smell of something I'll never forget was rotting somewhere. It was like rotting bile mixed with the smell of feces and urine, all
Nasty.
combined. This explains why JC looked so green. Looking around, Matt and Joe were off gathering wood for a fire, and it was getting dark rather fast.
You need to leave.
All we could do for a while was just stare at the Jackson Pollock of dead things.
Oh, you need to leave.
Is that a footprint? I snapped my head to where he was pointing. It looked like a bare human footprint and a few others leading away from this place. That looks like a footprint and a bare footprint. Who the hell walks around barefooted in these type of areas? There was debris everywhere. Rocks, glass, old shards of, like, building materials. Man, this is so strange. What do we even do? I say. This time, being where my mind was at the time, I seriously didn't know what to do. Who would be around in bare feet like we said? There should have not been anybody doing something like that here.
No.
Or better yet, I should have considered the fact that whoever this was, or whatever this was, might return to this spot.
Yeah.
Anyway, we walk over, and
Tell me about that one.
we find more footprints that look just like the ones from before. Most were even close to our own foot size. Joe and Matt got back sometime around dusk. It was starting to get dark, so we got a fire started, and we backed up our trucks and all lined them up, ready to get the hell out of there if need be. As the fire burns, we begin to drink. Matt and Joe are talking about the pile, like it's some poacher's dump area. Again, the fact that we were still there is absolutely insane.
Stupid.
I can't for the life of me tell you why
fucking
we didn't get out of
stupid.
there.
You should have
The
left.
forest got dark, and I mean dark.
That's like horror movie
The
shit.
moon was
Leave,
out,
bro.
and it just
Look at
seemed
it.
like it wouldn't touch this area. We all did only have a few drinks, not enough to get pissed drunk or anything. We didn't get super messed up, and we didn't do any hold my beer moments. JC was the first to point out that it was silent outside.
Why
Not the
are you
silence of the
still
woods at
fucking
night.
there?
I mean, it was silent. Like no sound other than us and the fire. No wind, bugs, nothing. Then, just like the scary movies, a glint of movement in the forest caught my eye. What was that?
What was
Did you guys
that,
see
bruh?
that? Who's that? Joe says, interrupting my sentence. We all look around and stand just outside the light of the fire. We couldn't see much, but what I saw, I could only describe as a half-naked man with this stupid grin on his face and this weird stick in his hand. Yo, dude, are you okay? Joe yells, and this thing lurches forward a few steps like a Walking Dead type creature.
Oh no.
What the hell?
Like a
Joe
zombie?
tells me, on the other hand, just to go into the truck and get my 1911. from under
Fucking
the seat.
leave!
I click the slide as I chamber around. James, what are you? Shut the hell up, JC, and get in your truck. We got to go now.
Yeah,
I
no
level my gun, taking aim at this thing. Seeing Joe to my right, he had gotten his AR-15 out of his tent.
Ah,
as
yes.
well. He says, James, bro, we need to leave. There's 2 more to his left. Now, we look over, and we see that these people or these things had these antler helmets.
Oh no.
I guess I don't really know how to explain them, nor do I care to. Matt, start my truck, Joe said. He rode there with Joe. Matt was like lightning in that moment, and ran to the truck and turned it on quicker than I've ever seen anything happen. JC, you too, bro. Fire it up. He starts his truck. Now, this man twitches left, right, and like every type of position you could imagine. It was like some Matrix glitch or something. I don't really know how to explain it, and I'm very sorry if I'm not making any sense. Then, I see this thing's eyes. Or the lack of eyes. It was... There was no white, just this golden yellow glint. It was like just a source of light. Not like it was eyeballs, if that makes any sense. That was all we needed. I hopped in the back of JC's truck, and he took off out of there. I started firing at this thing because it started chasing us. I hear the crack of the AR-15 go off, and 3 rounds go into this guy. But he doesn't stop. No. He doesn't even trip. He doesn't do anything.
Then fucking go.
He continues to run at us.
Clearly he's a fucking demon.
I shoot a few shots myself, shooting a few 45 ACP hollow point rounds.
Oh, Porky would be happy about that gun.
I'm not sure how many times I hit it, but I know I hit it at least once or twice. We drove around a sharp corner, and just like that, it suddenly disappeared and wasn't following us anymore. We didn't stop until we got to the main town, into much more lighted and populated areas. Our windows were all busted out. It looked like someone had keyed the sides of the car. The hood looked like it got stabbed by a pitchfork. I just brushed it off and tried to just assume that we had been attacked by some weird creep in the woods or something. But after listening to the show and reading stories and hearing tales around my area from natives, I believe that this was a Wendigo or a skinwalker. Maybe that's what it was.
Pretty sure skinwalker, if anything.
It's definitely not something of this world. If I know one thing,
it is of the world.
There are things out there that are real, and they are evil at their core. Be safe, friends, and thank you for reading my story.
We didn't read it, we heard it.
Much love to all in the swamp.
Oh, alright. Because he sent the swamp dweller. Is that it? Oh, we have one more.
Thanks for listening to these creepy and allegedly true encounters with skinwalker creatures sent in by viewers just like you. As always, if you have a story that you would like to share in a future episode, please be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I'd love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that help keep this show going on a daily basis. If you enjoyed these stories, please be sure to hit that like button, as it helps me out a ton. The more likes this episode gets, the more YouTube promotes it in the algorithm, and that's incredibly helpful to the swamp. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to give this a 5-star rating, as that helps us grow over there, and it's incredibly helpful. If you're new to the swamp, why not join us? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a new episode.
I don't worry, I am subscribed. I do like listening to spooky content.
Things natural and supernatural. If you're on the go and don't have YouTube Premium, but would still like to download and listen to your...
I'm done listening to your shilling, though. Anyway, I'm tired of some shilling on my own. I'd like to thank everyone for sticking with me tonight for the Skinwalker presentation for the Eerie Hours. I hope we've enjoyed it and maybe felt a little spooked by the Skinwalker thing, because it is pretty weird and pretty interesting at the same time, too. I'm going to do a little shilling and then we'll be done. Don't forget the movie caption contest, movie Pictionary, movie Hangman are going on the Discord, so be sure to play those. Don't forget tomorrow. I don't know if Porky's going to have his router fixed by tomorrow or not for a For the Boys thing. So if he doesn't, I'll do something. We'll see about that. And don't forget Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Esau's channel for Seats Open. Zach is going to suffer. He's going to have to watch some Cobra videos because Rock bought the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game. That's probably going to be like an hour of that show, so be sure to tune in for that as well. Probably get out of the way first and watch him suffer of all the Cobra stuff. We'll see you guys later.